My father died on a Tuesday. I know that because I was sorting the second delivery on Kirkstall Road when my phone buzzed, and I remember thinking it was probably a scam text because nobody ever called me. Nobody had called me in years. His name was Gerald Whitmore. He was 78. He'd lived in the same house in Headingley for 40 years, and I hadn't set foot inside it in over a decade. That wasn't my choice, not entirely, but I'll get to that. I'm a postal worker. Have been for 16 years. I wake up at 3:30, I sort letters, I walk my round, I come home to a one-bedroom flat above a chippy in Armley, and I eat something from a tin. That's my life. That was my life before the solicitor's letter arrived, and honestly, I expected it to be my life after. I was wrong. The letter came 3 weeks after the funeral. A funeral I wasn't invited to, by the way. My sister Denise handled the arrangements, and she told the family I was in no fit state to attend. I found out he was in the ground from a cousin's Facebook post. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for an hour. Not because I'd lost him a long time ago, but because someone had stolen my chance to say goodbye, and I knew exactly who. The solicitor was a woman named Patricia Oakes, small office on Park Row. She sat me down, offered me a cup of tea, and told me my father had left me everything. And when I say everything, I mean a property portfolio worth £2.3 million, 6 houses, 6 rental properties across Leeds and Bradford that my father had quietly accumulated over 30 years, remortgaging, reinvesting, building something brick by brick, while I thought he was just a retired bus driver living on his pension. Patricia watched my face and said, "He updated this will 14 months ago. He was very specific about his wishes. He wanted you to have it all." I asked about Denise. Patricia paused, and her pause told me everything. Your sister's not mentioned in the will. Your father was quite clear about that. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sick, because I knew what was coming. Denise is 7 years older than me. She moved back into Dad's house in 2011 after her second divorce, and she positioned herself as his carer. And look, at first maybe it was genuine. Dad had a bad hip. He needed help around the house. But Denise didn't just help. She installed herself. She became the gatekeeper. Every time I tried to visit, there was a reason I couldn't. Dad's having a bad day. Dad's asleep. Dad doesn't want to see you right now. She'd call me and say things like, "He gets agitated when you come around, you know that." And eventually I believed her. I stopped trying. That's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't feel like manipulation when it's happening. It feels like you're being reasonable. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until the probate proceedings, was that Denise had been siphoning Dad's pension for over a decade. She'd set up a direct debit from his account into hers. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $300 there, but by the end, it was nearly the full amount. She was taking almost $1,500 a month. She told him it was for household bills. She told the family she was sacrificing her own life to look after him. She was bleeding him dry. When Denise found out about the will, she didn't cry. She didn't grieve. She lawyered up within 48 hours. Her solicitor filed a challenge under the Mental Capacity Act, claiming Dad lacked the cognitive ability to make a valid will. And here's where it gets truly ugly. She produced medical documents, letters supposedly from Dad's GP, suggesting he'd been diagnosed with moderate dementia 18 months before the will was signed. They were forged. I didn't know that yet, but they were forged. She had taken legitimate NHS letterhead from correspondence in Dad's house and fabricated the content. She'd done it carefully, professionally, like someone who'd been planning for this possibility. But the documents were only half her strategy. The other half was me. Denise started calling every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the family. She told them I had a drug problem. She said I'd been using heroin for years, that I'd stolen money from Dad in the past, that the reason Dad cut me off was because I'd turned up at his house off my head and threatened him. None of it was true. Not a single word. I've never touched drugs in my life. I barely drink. But Denise knew something fundamental about family dynamics. People believe the person who's already in the room. She'd been there for a decade playing the devoted daughter, and I'd been absent. So when she told them I was an addict, they had no reason to doubt her. My cousin Mark sent me a message saying, "You should be ashamed of yourself taking money from a dying man." My Auntie Joan blocked me on everything. People I'd known my entire life looked at me like I was something scraped off a shoe. I sat in my flat above that chippy, surrounded by the smell of frying oil, and I genuinely considered walking away from 2.3 million pounds just to make it stop. Patricia Oakes told me not to. She said, "Your father wanted this. If you walk away, she wins, and she's already been winning for years." So I didn't walk away. The probate court proceedings dragged on for 11 months. 11 months of my life consumed by affidavits and witness statements and legal fees I was paying with money I didn't have, putting it all on credit cards because the estate was frozen. Denise's solicitor was aggressive, theatrical, painting me as this predatory figure who'd swooped in on a confused old man. But then Patricia did something brilliant. She subpoenaed Dad's actual medical records directly from the GP surgery. There was no dementia diagnosis. There never had been. Dad's GP confirmed he'd seen Gerald Whitmore regularly until 6 months before his death, and at no point had there been any concern about his mental capacity. The letters Denise had produced didn't match any records held by the surgery. The fonts were wrong, the reference numbers didn't exist. When this was presented to the court, Denise's solicitor asked for an adjournment. You could see it on his face. He hadn't known. She'd lied to her own lawyer, but it was the bank statements that finished her. Patricia had requested a full financial audit of Dad's accounts as part of the estate proceedings, and what came back was devastating. 12 years of systematic transfers. Over £140,000 moved from Dad's account into Denise's. No invoices, no care agreements, no receipts. Just money disappearing month after month while she told everyone she was sacrificing everything to look after him. And buried in Dad's paperwork in a drawer in his bedroom, Patricia's team found a handwritten note. It wasn't part of the will, it had no legal standing, but the judge allowed it to be read into the record. It said, "To my son David, I am sorry I let her keep you away. I was weak and I was afraid. This is all I can do now. Please forgive an old man who should have been braver." I couldn't breathe when they read that out. I sat in that courtroom in my post office fleece because I'd come straight from my shift, and I put my hand over my mouth, and I tried not to fall apart in front of strangers. The judge upheld the will in its entirety. He noted the deeply troubling evidence of financial abuse and referred the forged documents to the police. Denise was escorted out by her solicitor, who dropped her as a client that same afternoon. She was never charged with fraud. The CPS decided it wasn't in the public interest, whatever that means. But she lost everything that mattered to her, the family's sympathy, the narrative she'd built, the money she'd been skimming. Last I heard, she was living in a housing association flat in Morley, telling anyone who'd listen that she'd been robbed of her inheritance. The family hasn't apologized. Not Mark, not Auntie Joan, not any of them. A few have quietly unblocked me. Nobody said sorry. I don't think they will. I still work at the post office. I kept my round. I bought a proper flat, nothing flashy, just somewhere that doesn't smell like chip fat. The properties are managed by a letting agency now, and every month the rent comes in, and every month I think about my dad sitting in that house with her, writing that note, knowing exactly what she was, and not being able to stop it. He couldn't fight her while he was alive. So he fought her from the grave. And he won. My wife looked me dead in the eye and told me that going through her phone was a worse betrayal than the 6 months of explicit messages I found between her and her former student. Let that satisfying delusion sink in for a second. So here's what happened. I caught my wife having an affair with a guy she'd been grooming since he sat in her classroom. I sent every filthy message to his rich wife, and within 72 hours, her billionaire father was dismantling this kid's entire life, while my wife was still out there telling people, "I'd be crawling back any day now." She miscalculated badly. I'm 37 male. My wife is Kate, 35, a teacher who apparently never stopped mentoring her favorite student. The affair partner is Rumi, 28, married to Priya, whose father, Victor, is the kind of wealthy man who doesn't yell, he litigates. My buddy Derek is the one who lit the fuse when he called me stammering about what he'd just seen at a downtown restaurant. And me, I'm the husband who never wanted to play dirty but ended up outplaying every single one of them. Let me back up and give you the full picture, because none of this makes sense without understanding what Kate and I were before Derek's phone call blew it apart. We'd been married 4 years, together 6. Kate taught English at a well-regarded private high school, and she was genuinely good at it, the kind of teacher students remembered a decade later. I worked in commercial real estate, boring but stable, and between the two of us, we'd built something comfortable. A 3-bedroom house with a yard that was too big for 2 people, but perfect for the kids we kept saying we'd have next year. Date nights on Thursdays. A shared Netflix queue. The whole quiet architecture of a life that looks unremarkable from the outside, but feels like home when you're inside it. I loved her. That's not complicated. That's just the truth I have to say out loud before the rest of this story makes me sound like I never did. Now. Derek? He called me on a Tuesday evening. I was grilling chicken thighs on the back patio, and when I picked up, there was this long pause, the kind of silence that has weight to it. Derek is not a man who hesitates. He once told our college roommate to his face that his girlfriend was stealing from him. But that night, he sounded like someone trying to defuse a bomb with his voice. Hey man, so I was at Luca's downtown for Sarah's birthday thing. Okay, Kate was there. My hand stopped turning the tongs. Not because that was alarming, Kate went out with friends all the time, but because of what his voice was doing. The way it kept dipping, like each word cost him something. She wasn't alone, brother. He described it in fragments. Kate in a corner booth, a younger guy, his hand on her thigh, not casually, possessively. Her leaning into him, laughing with her whole body the way she used to laugh with me in our first year. Derek said they kissed. Not a peck, not ambiguous, the kind of kiss that makes strangers look away. I wanted to come over to your place right then, Derek said, but I didn't know if I was making it bigger than, you're not making it bigger. I knew. Somewhere beneath the denial, already assembling itself in my brain, I knew. Because when Kate came home that night, she told me she'd been at a coworker's wine tasting. She described the wines. She described the cheese board. She described a funny story about someone's husband. The level of detail was immaculate, the kind of specificity that only liars provide because truth tellers don't need to convince you. She never mentioned a restaurant. She never mentioned a man. That silence was louder than anything, Derek told me. I waited 3 days. I smiled at breakfast. I kissed her goodbye for work. I sat through a Thursday date night at our usual Italian place and watched her face for cracks while she talked about a student's college essay. Nothing. She was flawless. And that's what terrified me, how natural deception looked on her. Friday night, Kate fell asleep on the couch during a movie, her phone on the coffee table face down. I stared at it for 11 minutes. I know because the movie's runtime was ticking in the corner of the screen. 11 minutes of arguing with myself about privacy, about trust, about whether I was becoming the paranoid husband who ruins a good thing over a friend's misunderstanding. Then I picked it up. Her passcode was our anniversary. That detail still burns. I found the contact listed as Rumi16. Not Rumi, not a normal name entry. Rumi16, like a username, like a code designed to look meaningless if you scrolled past it. I didn't scroll past it. 6 months of messages. The first few were almost sweet inside jokes, references to books, the kind of intellectual flirtation Kate would have called mentorship if cornered. But they escalated fast. By month 2, the messages were explicit in a way that made my stomach physically contract. Descriptions of what they'd done. Plans for what they'd do next. Photos I will never unsee. And then I found the detail that turned heartbreak into something colder. Rumi had been her student. Not a college peer, not a colleague, a 17-year-old boy in her classroom. The 16 inches his contact name wasn't random. It was the year 2016, when he was in her class. The messages referenced their history, joked about how far they'd come since the back row. Kate's previous relationship, the one before me, the one she said ended, because her ex was emotionally unavailable, had ended because of Rumi. She'd been circling this man for a decade. I exported everything. Every message, every photo, every timestamp. I emailed the files to myself, deleted the sent record, and put her phone back on the coffee table. Then I sat in our dark kitchen for 2 hours, feeling something harden behind my ribs, like wet concrete setting. Saturday morning, I confronted her. I expected tears. Begging. The standard playbook. Instead, Kate's face cycled through surprise, then irritation, then something I can only describe as righteous fury directed entirely at me. You went through my phone. You've been sleeping with your former student for 6 months. You violated my privacy, and you want to talk about Kate. 6 months. She stood up from the kitchen table, grabbed her keys, and said the sentence that sealed her fate, "You'll be calling me by Monday, begging me to come home. I guarantee it." The door slammed. Her car started. And I sat there, jaw tight, already composing an email to Priya. I wanted to meet her and reveal everything, but I didn't make the move because it would have looked creepy. Some strange man showing up at a woman's door claiming her husband was a cheat. So I asked around, found Priya's email through Rumi's barely private social media, and sent it to her. Everything. The full export. She responded within an hour times. "How did you discover the truth?" asterisk. I told her everything in detail. I told her to read the messages carefully, and she would get all the clarity she needed. After a couple of hours, she responded asking if I had confronted Kate. I said yes. She said that she would involve her father to deal with Rumi and went offline. That was Wednesday. By Saturday, Priya was still gone. No responses. No read receipts. Nothing. I'm trying to reach out to her through all their social media accounts, mutual contacts, anything with a digital pulse. Because Rumi is using her for her father's money. I saw that clearly in the messages, the way he talked about the lifestyle and Victor's connections, and I'm terrified of what a cornered man does when his meal ticket starts. Asking questions. Meanwhile, Kate hasn't signed a single document. She's told her mother Gloria that I'm having a breakdown. She's told colleagues at the school that times I, times cheated on, times her asterisk. And 3 days ago, she sent me a text that read, "Times I want the house." My lawyer says I'll get it. Asterisk. She still thinks she's winning. What she doesn't know is that Victor Sandoval has already made his first phone call. Priya resurfaced on a Monday. Not with a message, with a phone call. Her voice was flat and controlled the way people sound when they've cried so much their body has simply stopped producing the chemicals for it. "I'm safe," she said. "My father's been handling things. I'm sorry I disappeared. I needed to be somewhere. Rumi couldn't reach me." The relief hit me so hard my knees softened. I'd been imagining headlines. I'd been imagining police reports. What's happening with him? "My father doesn't do things emotionally," Priya said. "He does them permanently." She explained it in pieces, the way you describe a car accident out of order, with strange details made vivid by shock. Victor Sandoval had spent the silent week not confronting Rumi, not yelling, not even acknowledging anything was wrong. Instead, he'd had his forensic accountant pull every financial record from the consulting firm where Rumi worked, the firm Victor's investment group had a controlling interest in. The firm Rumi had been hired into, I now understood, not because of talent, but because of marriage. What the accountant found wasn't planted. It didn't need to be. Rumi had been skimming. Small amounts routed through vendor invoices that didn't correspond to real vendors, padded expense reports for client dinners that never happened, the kind of petty graft that a man with a rich father-in-law commits because he believes the money is functionally his anyway. Victor had compiled it into a criminal referral. Embezzlement. Fraud. Wire fraud because some of the invoices cross state lines. Federal wire fraud. My father told Rumi's attorney that he has two options, Priya said. Full restitution, resignation, and an uncontested divorce, giving me everything. Or prosecution. Jesus. Rumi called it blackmail. My father's lawyer called it a courtesy notification of intended legal action. There's a difference, apparently, when you can afford the right vocabulary. I sat with that for a moment. Victor Sandoval hadn't fought with emotion. He'd fought with accountants and attorneys exactly as Priya had predicted. Rumi's charm, his easy smile, his talent for making women feel like the only person in the room, none of it mattered against a spreadsheet. Then Priya said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Rumi called me yesterday. He doesn't know I told my father about Kate. He thinks this is about the money. He actually asked me. Her voice cracked for the first time. He asked me to talk to my father, to smooth things over. He said he loved me. The dramatic irony was so thick I could taste it. Rumi scrambling to save his marriage to the woman whose father was destroying him times of the affair he didn't know she'd discovered. He thought Kate was irrelevant. He thought this was a financial audit gone wrong. He also asked if I knew you, Priya added quietly. What? He asked if some man named He Used Your Full Name had contacted me. He said Kate warned him you might try something crazy. He wanted to know if you'd reached out. I almost laughed. Almost. What did you tell him? Nothing. I hung up. Kate's campaign, meanwhile, had been escalating. She'd moved in with Gloria, who initially treated me like I'd had a psychotic episode. Kate had told her mother I'd become controlling and paranoid, that I'd fabricated evidence that I was trying to isolate her. Gloria called me once, her voice trembling with protective fury, and said she is my daughter and I know her. I said, Gloria, I'm going to send you something. You don't have to read it, but if you love her, you should. I sent Gloria a curated selection, nothing explicit, nothing designed to humiliate, just enough to show the timeline, the pet names, the references to hotel rooms on nights Kate had told me she was grading papers. Gloria never called me again. But 2 days later, Kate texted me times, you turned my own mother against me. You're sick. Asterisk. At the school, Kate had been more strategic. She'd told select colleagues that I had cheated, that I was vindictive, that the divorce was my fault. She was building a narrative fortress brick by brick, and I was watching it rise from across the street, knowing exactly how to bring it down. My lawyer said, "Don't." My lawyer said we had the house, we had the prenups, infidelity clause, we had everything we needed for a clean divorce. Kate refused to sign. Her counter-demand the house 60% of shared assets and spousal support. Her lawyer sent a letter claiming I had engaged in emotional abuse and surveillance. She wanted to go to trial. She wanted a stage, so I gave her one. I sent the explicit messages redacted of photos but not of content to the head of Kate's department. Not to students, not to parents, to the one administrator who would understand exactly what "since the back row" meant. Who would understand that Roomy16 wasn't a username, it was a timestamp. The school launched an internal review within 48 hours. Kate was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Her colleagues, the same ones she'd recruited into her narrative, went quiet with the specific silence of people recalculating which side of history they're standing on. Kate called me that night. Not texted. Called. "You'll never work in this town again," she said, her voice vibrating. "Sign the papers, Kate. I will destroy. Sign the papers. Or the unredacted versions go to the Parents Association, the school board, and every platform where your students might see exactly who mentored them." Silence. The kind that has weight to it. She signed on Thursday. The divorce finalized 6 weeks later. I kept the house. She kept nothing she demanded. Rumi, last I heard from Priya, had accepted Victor's terms: full restitution, resignation, uncontested divorce. The alternative was a federal courtroom and a public record that would follow him into every job interview for the rest of his life. Priya messaged me once more after it was done. Asterisk, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I hope you find peace." Asterisk, I told her I hoped the same for her. Then I archived the conversation and deleted her number. Not out of coldness, out of necessity. She was a reminder of the worst chapter, and I couldn't keep rereading it. Gloria never spoke to me again. I don't blame her. Loving your child doesn't require liking what they've done, but it does require choosing them, and she chose. I sold the grill. The one I'd been standing at when Derek called. It was a good grill, but every time I looked at it, I heard that weighted pause before he said her name. I booked a trip to Montana. Solo. No Vegas, no beach resort, no performative post-divorce reinvention. Just mountains, cold air, and the kind of silence that doesn't have weight to it, the kind that's just silence. The man who never wanted to play dirty walked away having outplayed everyone. And the woman who guaranteed I'd come begging by Monday learned something that should have been obvious from the start. No one is untouchable. Especially not the people who are certain they are. My wife told her ex-boyfriend that I love her too much to ever leave, and they both laughed about it. She didn't know I was listening to every single word. So my wife is a social media influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers, and I caught her carrying on a full-blown affair with the ex she swore was out of her life forever. But instead of confronting her right away, I spent weeks collecting every conversation, every lie, every mocking little comment she made about me, and then I used her own playbook against her. The woman who built her career on cameras forgot that cameras work both ways. I'm a 28-year-old data analyst. My wife is Bianca, 27 influencer, brand ambassador, and apparently a world-class liar. The guy she's been sneaking around with is Marcus, her ex-boyfriend of 3 years, who conveniently works at one of the brands she promotes. And my best friend Derek, he's the one who helped me document everything when the time came. Let me give you some background first. I've been cheated on before. Not by Bianca, by a girlfriend in college who spent 6 months making me feel insane for questioning her late nights and locked phone. When the truth finally came out, the betrayal wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing I'd seen every sign and talked myself out of believing my own eyes. I promised myself I'd never do that again. Bianca and I got married 2 years ago after dating for 3. She was already building her platform when we met: lifestyle content, brand partnerships, the whole ecosystem. I didn't mind being part of it. She'd film us cooking together, doing couples Q&As, little date night vlogs. Her followers ate it up. Couple goals, they'd comment. He looks at her like she's the whole universe. And honestly, I did. I was in love with the version of Bianca she showed me, and I thought that version was real. About a year into our marriage, Marcus resurfaced. They dated for 3 years before me, and she always described the breakup as mutual but messy. When his name popped up in her DMs because he'd gotten hired at one of the brands she promoted, she showed me the message herself. Unprompted. "Look, babe, small world," she said, rolling her eyes. I asked if it would be weird. She kissed my forehead and said, "He's nobody. That chapter's been closed for years." I believed her. Because I wanted to. 4 weeks ago, Bianca started working from home more frequently. New content strategy, she said, more authentic, less studio polished. I work remotely too, so in theory, this should have brought us closer. More lunches together, more random coffee breaks, more of the easy intimacy that makes a marriage feel alive. Instead, something shifted. It started small. I'd walk into the living room and she'd switch apps so fast her thumb blurred across the screen. I'd come up behind her at her desk and she'd slam her laptop shut, then laugh it off. "Surprise collab, babe. Can't spoil it." The first time I shrugged. The second time my stomach tightened. By the fifth time, that old alarm system, the one I built in college and never fully dismantled, was screaming. I brought it up gently. "You've been kind of guarded with your phone lately. Everything okay?" And here's what got me. She didn't get defensive. She overcorrected, handed me her phone with this open-wounded expression, scrolled through her recent text like she was presenting evidence of her own innocence. "See nothing. You can look at anything you want." Every conversation was clean, sanitized. The kind of clean that doesn't happen naturally. That's when I knew. A week later, we went to a get-together with some of her influencer friends. Bianca spent the entire dinner texting under the table. Between bites, between sentences, sometimes mid-sentence. Her friend Tara asked her a question and Bianca didn't even hear it, just sat there smiling at her screen with a softness I hadn't seen directed at me in weeks. When she caught me watching, she locked the phone and said, "Sorry, Brand, emergency." That night, after she fell asleep, I made a decision. Not an emotional one, a calculated one. I'm a data analyst. Pattern recognition is literally what I do for a living. So I installed a mirroring app on both our phones, hers during a shower the next morning, mine as the receiving end. Everything synced. Messages, call logs, app, activity. Within 48 hours, I had the full picture. Bianca was in daily contact with Marcus. Not professional contact. The messages were intimate, explicit, laced with inside jokes and pet names. I guess their love rekindled when he came back into the picture. They'd been seeing each other for at least 2 months. He knew my work schedule. He knew which days I had late meetings. He knew when I went to the gym. But the call, the intercepted call, that's what broke something inside me permanently. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Bianca told me she forgot to grab groceries and needed to run out. I watched her drive away, then opened the mirroring app and listened in real time as she called Marcus from the parking lot of a Whole Foods she never walked into. They talked for 22 minutes. She complained about having to perform for me. Marcus laughed and called me the safety net. And then Bianca said the words that I will hear for the rest of my life. "Jackie would never leave me. He loves me too much. Poor thing." Marcus laughed. She laughed. And something behind my ribs went cold and quiet. Now the thing is, I'm so sure Bianca is not supposed to be involved with any of the company's staff or bad-mouthing the company. During that same call, they trashed the brand, Marcus venting about management, Bianca mocking the products she smiles about in sponsored posts. If the organization finds out, her contract will be terminated and her image will be tarnished. That night, Bianca told me she was going out for girls' night. I said, "Have fun, babe." I kissed her cheek. She smiled that influencer smile, warm, effortless, completely hollow. Then I called Derek. We followed her to a restaurant downtown. Not a club, not a bar, a quiet Italian place with dim lighting and corner booths, the kind of place you take someone you're not hiding from yourself, just from everyone else. Derek had his camera ready. We walked in through the side entrance and found them in the back. Bianca was tucked under Marcus's arm, her head against his shoulder, his hand on her thigh. She was laughing at something on his phone. The same laugh from the intercepted call. I stood there for 10 seconds. Derek recorded everything. Then I walked up to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from them. Bianca's face went white. Marcus froze mid-sip. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just looked at her and said, "Poor thing showed up." Regarding the video my friend made, I haven't posted it online as intended because I have mixed feelings about it. For the past years, Bianca has maintained an excellent public image. And even though she gets dragged online by some of her annoying fans, she has not had any serious issues with the brands she influences. Right now, I'm going through so much emotionally, and I want to repay her for using me like that. I intend to leak the conversation between Bianca and her boyfriend and the video of them together. I have the intercepted calls where they trash the brand. I have the restaurant footage. I have every deleted message she thought was gone forever. The woman who built her empire on cameras is about to learn that cameras work both ways. I sat with those mixed feelings for 3 days. For the past years, Bianca had maintained an excellent public image. And even though she gets dragged online by some of her annoying fans, she had not had any serious issues with the brands she influences. Part of me, the part that still remembered the woman I'd married, hesitated. Right now, I was going through so much emotionally, and every hour, the weight shifted between grief and something sharper. Something with teeth. But then I'd hear it again. Asterisk. Poor thing. Asterisk. The laughter that followed. The casual cruelty of two people who'd turned my devotion into a punchline. I wanted to repay her for using me like that. So I stopped having mixed feelings. I started with her parents. I sent them a carefully compiled folder, the restaurant video screenshots of the intercepted messages, and the audio from the Whole Foods parking lot call. No commentary, no emotional plea. Just evidence time-stamped and organized because that's what I do. I'm a data analyst. I let the data speak. Her mother called me within an hour, sobbing. Her father didn't call at all. He texted one line, times, "I'm sorry, son," asterisk. Then I went public. I uploaded the restaurant footage to every platform Bianca had built her empire on. Derek helped me cut it clean. No narration, no captions, just the raw 30-second clip of my wife nestled under another man's arm in a candlelit booth, followed by the moment she looked up and saw me standing there. Her expression alone told the entire story, the blood draining from her face, the mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out, the hand pulling away from Marcus's thigh a full 3 seconds too late. Alongside the video, I posted the intercepted call excerpts. Not the intimate parts. I wasn't trying to humiliate her sexually. I posted the parts where she and Marcus trashed the brand. Marcus venting about incompetent management. Bianca mocking the very products she'd filmed herself using with that signature smile, calling them overpriced garbage. I wouldn't feed my dog. I posted her laughing about how easy it was to fake enthusiasm for sponsored content. I posted Marcus coaching her on which talking points to hit in her next campaign video while simultaneously calling the CEO a clown. The brand's social media team found it before their legal department did. By noon the next day, Bianca's contract was terminated. The official statement was diplomatic. We have chosen to part ways with Bianca Morales effective immediately, but the subtext was a controlled explosion. Within hours, Marcus was fired too. The company didn't even give him a meeting. Security escorted him out with a box. Then the dominoes started falling. 3 other sponsors pulled their partnerships by end of week. Her management company dropped her with a form email. The follower count that had taken her 5 years to build began hemorrhaging 10,000 the first day, 30,000 by the third. Comment sections she used to curate like gardens turned into graveyards of mockery and disbelief. Screenshots of her old couple's content circulated with new captions. Couple goals became couple fraud. Headlines picked her name up like carrion birds finding a carcass. Asterisk, influencers, perfect marriage exposed as elaborate lie. Asterisk, asterisk, brand ambassador, caught mocking, own sponsors and leaked audio. Asterisk, every outlet, every blog, every gossip account. The algorithm that had built her was now burying her. Bianca called me 47 times in 2 days. I let every call ring through to voicemail. The messages evolved like stages of grief, on fast forward, confusion, bargaining, fury, threats. Then I whispered, "Jackie, please, we can fix this at 3 a.m. that I deleted without finishing. What she did next, she did to herself. She showed up at my office on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd already moved out of our apartment and was staying with Derek. She stormed past reception, screaming my name, Mascara Street, voice cracking between rage and hysteria. Security removed her in under 4 minutes. 2 coworkers recorded it on their phones. I didn't even go downstairs. That Friday night, she found Derek's address. Derek called me at 11 p.m. "Brother, you need to see this." He'd heard the commotion from his living room and activated the security cameras I'd helped him install 2 years ago, irony layered on irony. The footage showed Bianca in the driveway, kitchen knife in hand, slashing all 4 of Derek's tires with methodical fury. Then she keyed a long, jagged scratch down the entire driver's side of his car. Then she picked up a landscaping stone and hurled it through his front window. The glass hadn't finished settling before Derek was on the phone with the police. We sued her for property damage. Both of us, Derek for the car and Window Me, as co-plaintiff for harassment. In court, Bianca's attorney tried a Hail Mary defense. I had fabricated everything out of jealousy, planted the messages, staged the restaurant encounter. The judge reviewed the video evidence, all of it, including the security footage of her destroying Derek's property, and ruled against her on every count. Marcus didn't show up. Not to court, not to support her, not even a text from what I heard. The man she'd burned her marriage for evaporated the moment the spotlight turned hot. The judge ordered full restitution. Bianca signed the divorce papers without contesting a single term. There was nothing left to contest. No leverage, no audience, no income, no partner waiting in the wings. Just a woman sitting in a courtroom in clothes she couldn't afford to dry clean anymore, staring at the table while a judge itemized the cost of her choices. I blocked her on everything that same afternoon. Every platform, every number, every possible point of contact. Derek did the same. Sometimes I think about what she said in that parking lot. Asterisk, he loves me too much to leave me. Asterisk, she was half right. I did love her too much. But she confused devotion with weakness, and by the time she realized the difference, the camera she built her life around had already captured everything. The influencer who lived by the lens died by the lens, and the poor thing walked away free. I funded my wife's entire acting career, gave up my own dreams so she could chase hers, and she repaid me by using that talent to perform the role of faithful wife while sleeping with 2 men in our bed. Then there's the guy I was hooking up with for months who swore he was single. Turns out his wife works directly under me at my job every single day. First story. I'm Mike, 33. I married Tracy when she was 24, became her biggest cheerleader, her agent, her ATM, whatever she needed to make it as an actress. She landed her first theater role and started weekend rehearsals. What she was actually rehearsing had nothing to do with any script. Second story. I'm a bisexual man in my 30s. I met a guy I'll call Dean on a dating app. Casual thing, no strings. Then I saw him at a mall with his wife and 2 kids, and his wife is Natalie, a woman who reports directly to me at work. Tracy and I met at a movie theater in 2018. She was working the concession stand, and I was the idiot who kept coming back for popcorn I didn't need just to talk to her. She had this laugh that made you feel like you'd accomplished something. 3 months of refills later, I asked her out. A year after that, I proposed. She said yes before I finished the sentence. What people don't understand is that Tracy wasn't always the person she became. Early on, she was warm, present. She'd fall asleep on my shoulder during bad movies and wake up pretending she'd watched the whole thing. She told me on our 3rd date that she wanted to be an actress, and the way her eyes lit up, I believed in her dream before I even believed in us. So I invested. Not blindly, but deliberately. I had my own ambitions. I'd been saving to open a small recording studio. Music production was my thing since college. But Tracy kept getting rejected from auditions, and each rejection carved a little more light out of her. I couldn't watch that. I redirected the studio fund into acting classes, headshots, a vocal coach, a better wardrobe for callbacks. Eric, my best friend since high school, told me I was being stupid. You're building her a ladder, Mike. What happens when she climbs it and doesn't look down? I told him he was cynical. That's what I always told him. We agreed to postpone having kids. Tracy said she needed to establish herself first, and I respected that. I picked up extra freelance work to cover the gap while she went to workshops and open calls. I drove her to auditions 2 hours away. I read lines with her at midnight when she couldn't sleep. I was the audience before she ever had one. Then, 14 months ago, she got the call. A local theater company cast her in an original production, a real role, not background work. Tracy screamed so loud the neighbors knocked on our door. That night, we celebrated like we were 21 again. I remember thinking, times, this is what it was all for. Asterisk. Rehearsals started on weekends, Saturday mornings, sometimes running into Sunday. I didn't question it. Why would I? This was the thing we'd sacrificed for. The changes were gradual. So gradual that if you weren't paying attention, and I wasn't not the way I should have been, you'd miss them entirely. First, the phone became an extension of her hand. She'd tilt the screen away when I walked past. Not dramatically, just enough. Then the texting at 1 a.m. I asked once who she was talking to. Jake. He's my co-star. We're running lines. Running lines at 1 in the morning? I let it go. The wardrobe shift came next. Tracy had always dressed well, but suddenly it was different. Shorter skirts, lower necklines, perfume I'd never smelled before. She started going to rehearsal, looking like she was going to a club. Our conversation shrank to logistics. What's for dinner? Did you pay the electric bill? I'll be home late. Eric noticed before I did. When's the last time she actually talked to you? Not texted, talked. I couldn't answer. One night I tried to initiate something in bed. Tracy rolled over and said she was exhausted from rehearsal. Fair enough. But I lay there staring at the ceiling and something shifted in my chest. A hairline crack I tried to ignore. I brought it up the following weekend. Carefully. I said, I felt like we were drifting. Tracy's reaction was surgical. Her eyes softened. She took my hands. She said, baby, I'm just stressed. This role is everything I've worked for. You know that better than anyone. Then she kissed my forehead and delivered the line I'll never forget. Only a foolish woman would cheat on you, Mike. And I believed her. Because she was a good actress. The best I'd ever seen. The next week, Eric showed me a photo someone had posted on Instagram. Tracy, at a bar with a blonde guy, his arm draped over her shoulder. She told me she was at a late rehearsal. That doesn't look like blocking a scene to me, Eric said. My hands went cold. I confronted Tracy. She exploded. That's Chris from the cast. We all went out after rehearsal. You're going to police who I stand next to now. She turned it on me so fast I ended up apologizing. But the crack was widening. I couldn't sleep. I started checking the phone bill, dozens of calls to one number, some lasting over an hour. I Googled the number. No name attached. I hired a private investigator. A quiet guy in his 40s who looked like he'd heard every version of this story and none of them surprised him anymore. He didn't judge. He just asked for dates, times, and a photo of Tracy. Within 2 weeks, he had documentation. Tracy and the blonde Chris meeting at a coffee shop that turned into his car that turned into a makeout session in a parking garage. Photos time-stamped. Then the overnight, Tracy told me she was going to a friend's birthday party and would crash there. The PI followed her straight to Chris's apartment. She didn't leave until 11 the next morning. I sat in my car in the PI's office parking lot and read the report 3 times. Every photo felt like a knife wound I'd already been carrying without knowing where the blood was coming from. Now that I think of it, I should have started my investigation from the moment our communication dropped and she upgraded her wardrobe. But is that how marriage is meant to be? Suspect your spouse every time something shifts? I wasn't a simp who over-pampered Tracy or anything. We shared the bills, she did most of the chores, and I always controlled my emotions around her. I'm saying this because I've seen stories where most men ignore the red flags. I thought I was different. I wasn't. The PI called me on a Thursday. I was supposed to be out of town for a work trip through Friday. He said, "Come home early. Tonight, I'll drive." I got in his car at 9 p.m. We pulled onto my street at 10:15. There was a blue Toyota Venza parked in my driveway. I didn't knock on my own front door. I want you to understand that. A man shouldn't have to knock on his own front door. The PI stayed 2 steps behind me. I turned the key slowly, not because I was being strategic, but because my hands were shaking so badly, the lock felt like a combination safe. The house was dim. Living room empty. 2 wine glasses on the counter, one with lipstick, one without. Music playing from the bedroom, our bedroom. Something with bass I didn't recognize. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and heard laughter. Tracy's laugh. The one that used to make me feel like I'd accomplished something. The PI put his hand on my shoulder. I'm recording. Don't touch anyone. I took the stairs 3 at a time. The door wasn't even locked. She hadn't even bothered to lock the door. What I saw when I pushed it open will live behind my eyes for the rest of my life. Tracy was handcuffed to the headboard, our headboard, the one we'd picked out together from a furniture store in Raleigh, and Chris the blonde was on top of her, but there was a second man, someone I'd never seen. He was positioned behind Chris, involved in a way I don't need to describe because the image has already burned itself into a place no amount of therapy will reach. 3 people, my bed, my sheets, my wife. Tracy saw me first. Her face went through every stage of grief in about 2 seconds. Shock, terror, something that almost looked like relief, and then the actress kicked in. Even handcuffed to a bed with 2 men, she defaulted to performance. Mike, wait. We were just rehearsing. Rehearsing. Handcuffed to the bed. With 2 men. Rehearsing. I lunged. Not at her. At Chris. The PI caught me from behind, both arms wrapped around my chest, and I'm not a small guy, but he held me like he'd done this 100 times. He probably had. Not worth it, he said in my ear. I have everything. It's done. Chris scrambled off the bed, grabbing his jeans from the floor. The second man was already halfway to the window like he was considering a 2-story jump. Tracy was pulling at the handcuffs, screaming my name, mascara running. Mike, please listen to me. Who has the key? I asked. My voice sounded like someone else's. Flat. Mechanical. Chris fumbled in his pocket and tossed a small key onto the bed without looking at me. He and the other man were out of the room in under a minute. I heard the front door slam, then the Venza starting. I didn't uncuff her. I turned around and walked downstairs. The PI followed. I sat on the couch for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the microwave. Tracy eventually freed herself. She must have reached the key and came down wrapped in the sheet from our bed. Mike, I know what that looked like. Get out. Can we just get out? She stood outside for almost an hour shouting my name and pleading that I let her in. But after acting like she was remorseful, she became abusive, called me names, and left afterward. The next 3 days I didn't eat. Eric came over and sat with me without saying, "I told you so," which is how you know someone is actually your friend. On the 4th day, I started thinking clearly. The PI's footage was thorough, timestamps, faces, everything. But I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted Tracy to understand what it felt like to have something you'd built your whole identity around ripped away. I did my research. The director of Tracy's play, the one who'd given her the break she dreamed about, was a guy in his early 30s with a growing reputation in the local theater scene. And through Chris's social media, which he'd been too careless to make private, I found something interesting. The director was tagged in photos with Chris. Couple photos. Vacation photos. Anniversary dinner photos? Chris wasn't just cheating on some random boyfriend. He was cheating on the man who controlled Tracy's career. I contacted the director. We met at a coffee shop. He was guarded at first, thought I was a jealous husband trying to sabotage a production. Then I showed him the video. Not all of it. Enough. He didn't say a word for a long time. Then he stood up, shook my hand, and left. By the end of that week, Tracy and Chris were both fired from the production. The director released a statement about creative differences. Tracy called me 17 times. I answered once. You destroyed everything I worked for. No, Tracy, you did that yourself. I just made sure the right people saw your best performance. The divorce papers arrived the same week she lost the role. She signed without a fight. I think the reality had finally broken through even her talent for pretending. This happened last week and I finally dared to share it here because I have not been myself since the day I caught Tracy with those two guys. I don't know how all of this happened right under my nose. Eric keeps telling me I'll come out the other side. Maybe. But right now, I'm sitting in a quiet house that still smells faintly like her perfume, and the recording studio fund I emptied for her dreams is gone, and I'm 33 years old, starting from zero. The worst part isn't the betrayal. The worst part is that she was right about one thing: she really was a phenomenal actress. She played the role of loving wife so convincingly that I gave her a standing ovation every single day. I just didn't realize the show was never for me. My wife spent 25 years telling anyone who'd listen that cheaters were the lowest form of human garbage. She'd cut friends out of her life for staying with unfaithful partners. She made loyalty her entire identity. So when I found the emails proving she'd been sleeping with a bankrupt opiate addict she met in AA, I didn't just lose my marriage. I lost my entire understanding of reality. 2 marriages, both destroyed by infidelity. A daughter who flipped her car into a creek because she found her mother's affair before I did. A woman who mocked my deepest wounds while cackling like she'd lost her mind. And somehow, on the other side of all that wreckage, I found the one thing I never believed was possible again. I'm a tech executive in my late 50s, a musician, a woodworker. My wife is Denise. Her affair partner is Rick, a 58-year-old hotel worker she met in recovery. My daughter Ellie was 17 when her world detonated. And Catherine, you'll meet Catherine when the time is right. The first marriage taught me what betrayal felt like. The second taught me I hadn't learned a damn thing. Denise and I met when I was 30. She was beautiful, whip smart, and had opinions that could strip paint. On our third date, she told me about her college roommate who'd taken back a cheating boyfriend. I helped her move out, Denise said, stabbing a piece of salmon with her fork. Not from his apartment, from mine. I don't keep weak people in my life. I remember thinking times, this is the safest woman on earth. Asterisk. She wasn't just loyal, she was militantly loyal. She'd built a fortress around the concept and dared anyone to breach it. We married. Had Ellie. Built 25 years of what I genuinely believed was an unassailable partnership. I played guitar in a weekend, band-built furniture in the garage, climbed the ladder at a tech firm until I was running divisions. Denise stayed home with Ellie, then got her real estate license. Then, when the drinking got bad enough that she couldn't hide it behind book club anymore, she got sober through AA. I supported every step of that. Drove her to meetings, held her hair back during the detox sweats, told her I was proud of her because I was. What I didn't know was that AA introduced her to Rick. The distance started about 8 months before I found the emails. Subtle at first, she'd come home from meetings energized but evasive, talking about her healing journey in language that felt borrowed from someone else's mouth. Then, less subtle. She started picking fights about nothing. I'd load the dishwasher wrong and get a 20-minute lecture about how I never listened. I'd ask how her day was and she'd say, "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to rebuild yourself from scratch." I thought she was processing sobriety. I gave her space. I gave her grace. She used both to build a runway. One Thursday night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, not yet. I was looking for a recipe she'd bookmarked, but the browser had her email open, and the preview pane showed a message from a name I didn't recognize. Rick. The email was short. Familiar. The kind of short and familiar that doesn't exist between strangers. I scrolled down and my hands went cold. Not explicit, not in that thread, but intimate in a way that was worse. Inside jokes, pet names. A reference to last Tuesday that made my stomach fold in half because last Tuesday, she'd told me she was at a women's meeting. I made my first critical mistake. I told her what I'd found. The moment the words left my mouth, I watched her face cycle through 3 expressions in under 2 seconds. Shock, calculation, performance. Then the tears came perfectly timed. We kissed once, at a meeting. It was awful and I felt sick and I ended it immediately. She grabbed my hands. She looked me dead in the eyes with a sincerity so convincing I felt guilty for doubting her. You're the only man I've ever loved. Rick is a broken person and I was trying to help him and it went too far for 1 second and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. We spent the weekend in what I now call the false reconciliation. Long talks, crying, lovemaking that felt desperate and performative in a way I couldn't name at the time. She said everything right. She always knew what right sounded like, but something gnawed at me. A phrase from one of the emails, time, same room times. You don't write that about a single kiss. The following Monday while she was at work, I found her old phone in a drawer. She'd factory reset it, but she'd backed up her photos to the cloud and forgotten about the text message archive synced to her tablet. I sat in my workshop sawdust still on my jeans and read 6 months of messages between my wife and a 58-year-old bankrupt opiate addict who worked the front desk of a Comfort Inn. Explicit, detailed, logistical. They had a room. They had a schedule. They had a shorthand for when I was traveling for work. She'd text a single musical note emoji and he'd confirm with a clock. I set the tablet down on my workbench and stared at the wall for what might have been 40 minutes. My hands didn't shake. That's what scared me. I felt like someone had scooped out my chest cavity and replaced it with concrete. When I confronted her with the evidence, the one kiss story evaporated. She cried differently this time, ugly, panicked, real. I told her I was giving her a gift, one chance at reconciliation. Full transparency, full accountability. We'd do the work. She agreed to everything. What neither of us knew was that Ellie had found those same emails weeks before I did. My 17-year-old daughter had been carrying her mother's secret like a grenade with the pin pulled, and nobody heard the explosion until she was upside down in her car, in a creek bed, blood alcohol, twice the legal limit, expelled from National Honor Society pills in her backpack that didn't belong to her. And when Denise found out that Ellie knew, when Ellie screamed at her mother that she was a liar and a hypocrite, and everything she'd ever taught her was garbage, Denise looked at our daughter and said the words that still make my jaw tighten 7 years later. You are the reason I want to drink. Then she got in her car and peeled out of the driveway so fast the tires left marks on the concrete. Ellie called me sobbing, convinced her mother was going to kill herself, convinced it would be her fault. That's when the inversion happened. Ellie couldn't be angry at Denise. Anger might kill her. So Ellie turned all of it on me, the safe parent, the one who wouldn't self-destruct. Denise let it happen, encouraged it. She started monitoring my posts on an online support forum, feeding details to Ellie, out of context, whispering that Dad was airing family business to strangers. One night, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, folded her hands like a therapist, and said, "I've forgiven myself. I think you need to respect that." I stared at her. She stared back, waiting for applause. I gave her a year. 12 months of couples therapy, individual therapy, books, workshops, the whole architecture of reconciliation. I did the work because I loved someone so much it was hard to believe she could ever do the unimaginable. And for 12 months, I waited for her to meet me halfway. Instead, on a Tuesday night in November, she met me at the bottom. We'd been arguing about nothing, a credit card charge maybe, or something equally small. The kind of argument that was never about the thing. It was about, I was standing in the kitchen doorway and she was sitting at the table with a glass of sparkling water, and somewhere in the middle of my sentence, she started laughing. Not real laughter, something else. "You want to know what's funny?" she said, and her voice had a quality I'd never heard before, high, brittle, theatrical. "You, walking around this house like some wounded saint. You, with your little forum posts and your therapist and your..." She pressed the back of her hand to her forehead in a mock swoon. "Oh, times Denise hurt me. Denise broke my trust. I gave her everything and she, asterisk..." She was imitating me. Not generically, specifically. She was using the exact words I'd said in our couple sessions, the exact cadence of things I'd whispered in bed at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, the precise inflection of my voice when it cracked during our worst conversations. She'd cataloged every moment of vulnerability I'd ever shown her, and she was performing them back to me like a one-woman show. Then came the fake tears. She scrunched her face, made exaggerated sobbing sounds, and actually cackled, head thrown back at the impression. Do you hear yourself? Do you know what you sound like? You sound like a Times child. Asterisk. My hands were flat on the counter. I remember the grain of the wood under my palms. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. I remember the specific quality of silence inside my own skull when something fundamental rearranges itself. 25 years. Every fear I'd ever confessed, every wound I'd let her see, every night I'd chosen to be soft with her instead of guarded. She'd stored it all. And now she was using it like ammunition. Not because she was angry, but because my pain made her feel powerful, and feeling powerful was easier than feeling ashamed. I looked at her. She was still laughing, but her eyes were watching me the way a person watches when they know they've gone too far and can't stop. I'm done, I said. Not loud, not dramatic. The quietest sentence I've ever spoken. She stopped laughing. The divorce cost me $200, 000. I bought out her share of the house and pension because I wanted clean, I wanted surgical. My attorney told me I was overpaying. I said I didn't care. What saved me from financial ruin was absurd. Denise's own appraiser undervalued the house by several $100,000. A professional mistake that amounted to the universe's only act of mercy in the entire process. I signed the papers, wrote the check, and sat alone in a house that smelled like sawdust and 25 years of someone else's perfume. Ellie didn't speak to me for 4 months after the divorce was finalized. Denise had spent those months whispering, not screaming, never screaming, because screaming would have been too obvious. Whispering that I'd abandoned the family, that I'd chosen my pride over her recovery, that a real man would have stayed. I never once told Ellie what her mother had said to me that Tuesday in November. I never told her about the cackling, the mockery, the performance. I just waited. I want to provide a hopeful story to those who need hope. My 2 marriages ended in spousal infidelity, both with kids involved. It was horrible both times. First time after 7 years together, the second after 25. I didn't think I could ever trust again. After lots of therapy, I realized my picker was broken. I was picking women who were beautiful, smart, but ultimately narcissistic, much like my father was. I did a lot of self-reflection and re-entered the dating scene prematurely, but I'm in my 60s, and I wanted to have an experience with a woman that was not haunted by the last one. Catherine was someone I'd known peripherally for years, a friend of a friend from the old couple's dinner days. Ivy League education, played cello, had her own betrayal story that she carried with the quiet dignity of someone who'd done the work and didn't need to perform having done the work. We reconnected at a mutual friend's birthday party. She asked me how I was doing, and I said better, and she nodded like she knew exactly what that word cost. We've been together for years now. We have never had a fight. Not because we avoid conflict, because she doesn't weaponize intimacy. She disagrees with me the way an adult disagrees with another adult. The first time she said, "I think you're wrong about that," without any edge, without any cruelty, without storing it for later use. I almost cried at the dinner table. Ellie graduated from a competitive college in New York City. She rebuilt her relationship with me slowly, brick by brick, and one evening over dinner she said, "I respect that you never badmouthed Mom." My throat closed. I just nodded. 7 years after D-Day, Denise showed up at my house to pick up old family videotapes. She stood on the porch looking nervous, heavier, older, in a way that had nothing to do with age. She said she was sorry. She said she went crazy and ruined everything. She said she understood if I hated her, I didn't hate her. That's what surprised me. I searched for the anger the way you pat your pockets for your keys, and it simply wasn't there. I nodded. I gave her the tapes. I wished her well, and I meant it. Catherine and I married in our front yard. My 3 grandsons were the flower boys. The 2 oldest scattered petals with enormous seriousness. The youngest, 2 years old, faced like a biscuit, wandered off halfway down the aisle to play with Grandpa's woodworking scraps piled by the garage. Everyone laughed. Catherine squeezed my hand. I used to think the goal was forgiveness. It isn't. The goal is the ability to trust again. Not the same person. Not the same way. But to stand in front of someone and say, "Times here is every soft thing about me times," and actually believe in your bones that they won't use it to destroy you, that's the whole thing. That's everything. My mother-in-law told me I disgraced her family's genetics by existing. At her husband's birthday party, in front of 40 relatives, while standing in a house I paid for. So here's the situation. My in-laws worship beauty like a religion, and I was their heresy. They lived rent-free in a home I bought, mocked me daily for my appearance, and when I finally asked for basic respect, they chose homelessness over apologizing. Then their golden child daughter dumped them in a care facility, and suddenly the ugly daughter-in-law was the only phone number worth dialing. I'm 31 female and apparently not pretty enough to deserve gratitude. My husband is Lior, 31, the only one in his family who sees people instead of faces. His mother is Vivian, 61, a woman who weaponized beauty her entire life. His father, Gerald, 65, enabled every cruel word. And his sister Nadine, 34, played the devoted daughter right up until devotion got inconvenient. The thing about marrying into the Ashford family is that nobody warns you. The audition never ends. I met Lior at a hospital fundraiser. I was there because I had organized it. He was there because his company had donated imaging equipment. He asked me to dinner that night, and I said yes, because he looked at me like I was already enough. I didn't know then that his family operated on an entirely different metric. Vivienne had been a catalog model in the 80s, not famous regional. Department store circulars, the occasional magazine spread for a mid-tier jewelry brand. But she'd built an identity around it that calcified into doctrine. Beauty was virtue. Beauty was proof of worth. She passed this gospel to Nadine, who inherited her mother's cheekbones and wielded them like credentials, and to Lior, who quietly rejected it and never told anyone why. The first time I met Vivienne, she held my face between her manicured fingers and turned it side to side like she was inspecting fruit at a market. Interesting bone structure, she said, which I later learned was the most generous thing she'd ever say about me. We married small. Vivienne wore black. The house situation started 2 years before Gerald's birthday party. Lior and I had been married for a year when his parents' financial situation collapsed. Gerald's investment portfolio imploded bad bets on speculative real estate, compounded by pride that prevented him from pulling out early. They were about to lose their home. Vivienne called Lior sobbing, and Lior called me. Here's what people don't understand. I didn't help because I was naive. I helped because my own parents taught me that family means showing up even when it costs you. My father had worked 32 years in municipal water management, so my mother could stay home with my disabled brother. Sacrifice wasn't abstract to me. It was Tuesday. I had savings, substantial savings earmarked for my parents' retirement care. I redirected 85% of it toward the EMI on a house in Vivienne and Gerald's neighborhood, a house Lior had been about to sell because he couldn't carry the payments alone. I covered it. We transferred ownership to my name because that was the legal reality of who was paying. And then we moved his parents in, rent-free, no questions asked. For 3 years, I said nothing. Not when Vivienne rearranged the furniture I'd chosen and told guests it was her home. Not when Gerald referred to me as Lior's wife instead of my name at family dinners, as if naming me would make my presence too real. Not when Nadine visited every other Sunday and the three of them would sit in the living room speaking French, a language I don't speak, while I prepared food in the kitchen. I said nothing because I believed grace was cumulative, that eventually the sheer weight of my kindness would crack something open in them. I was wrong. Gerald's 65th birthday. 42 relatives packed into the house. My house and Vivienne had spent 3 weeks planning it like a state dinner. I'd funded the catering. I'd taken 2 days off work to help set up. I was carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres through the living room when I heard my name. Not my name. Or Vivienne called me when she thought I couldn't hear. That weird-looking girl has disgraced this family's genetics just by existing. Look at her. Look at my son. People ask me if she's his Times assistant, asterisk. Laughter. Not all 42 relatives. But enough. I stopped walking. The tray trembled in my hands. Vivienne saw me and didn't flinch. She Times straightened, asterisk. Oh, good, you heard. Maybe now you'll understand why I keep asking Lior to reconsider. The room went silent. I set the tray down on the nearest table with a steadiness that surprised even me, and I walked out. Not dramatically. Not crying. I just left. I sat in my car for 40 minutes and stared at the steering wheel until my hands stopped shaking. That night, I told Lior I wanted the house back. He didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. He called a family meeting the following weekend and laid it out, apologized to my wife, or vacate her property. Gerald intervened first. You don't have to be her puppet for that. You married her, and now she is doing her duty. Don't put her on a pedestal. Lior snapped. His voice cracked with something I'd never heard from him. Not anger exactly, but the sound of a man realizing his father had never once seen him clearly. I times respect times her for everything, and you should also respect her because she has let you live in her house for the last 3 years and never said a word. The silence that followed was surgical. They were shocked to know the house was mine. Lior told them the truth, that he'd been about to sell when I saved it, paid for 85% of the EMI, and that he'd transferred ownership to my name because it was the right thing to do. They didn't apologize. They didn't even blink toward remorse. Lior asked them directly. Apologize to her. Vivienne's lip curled. A times simp asterisk. My own son, a simp. It was her duty to help her husband at bad times. That's what wives do. That's not charity, that's obligation. Gerald nodded. Nadine on speakerphone said nothing, which was its own kind of vote. Then leave, Lior said quietly. And they did. Vivienne packed 3 suitcases, Gerald loaded them into Nadine's car, and they drove away from a house they didn't own, toward a daughter whose devotion had an expiration date they couldn't yet read. 2 weeks of silence followed. Then, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. The front window of the living room. A brick wrapped in a page torn from one of Vivienne's old modeling composites her face at 23 jaw, tilted eyes full of a confidence that had curdled into cruelty over 40 years. No note. None was needed. Lior found me standing in the hallway in bare feet glass, glittering across the hardwood like scattered teeth. He pulled me back before I stepped forward. Don't move, he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had just understood something final. The police came. Filed a report. Insufficient evidence, they said, though. The composite page told its own story. 2 nights later, my father, who had been staying with us while we prepared his room, found Gerald standing on the sidewalk at dusk, staring at the house. Not approaching. Just standing. My father, 71 years old with a replaced hip and a heart condition, went outside to ask if he needed something. Gerald told him his daughter had married above her station, and that the house would come back to the Ashfords one way or another. My father came inside and sat down at the kitchen table and didn't speak for an hour. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were wet, and he said, I didn't raise you to be treated like this. That sentence broke something in me that Vivienne's public humiliation hadn't. Because my father had never once complained. Not when he worked double shifts. Not when my brother's care costs consumed every vacation they might have taken. He had absorbed difficulty, like soil absorbs rain, quietly, completely. And now, this man who had earned every ounce of peace I was trying to give him was being terrorized on a sidewalk by someone whose mortgage I had paid. I filed for the restraining order the next morning. The renovation took 3 months. I gutted the bathroom on the ground floor and rebuilt it with grab bars, a walk-in shower, a seat. I widened the door frames. I installed a ramp at the side entrance. Every modification was a sentence in a language Vivienne would never understand. Times, this is what love looks like when it isn't performed for an audience. Asterisk. My father moved in on a Saturday. He stood in the doorway of his room and touched the wall like he was confirming it was real. This is mine, he asked. This is yours. He unpacked a single framed photo of my mother, gone 4 years now, and set it on the nightstand, and that was enough. That was the whole ceremony. Lior severed contact with his parents formally, not through a dramatic phone call, through a letter handwritten 3 paragraphs long. I didn't read it. He didn't offer, but when he sealed the envelope, his hands were steady and his jaw was set in a way that told me the decision had been made long before the pen touched paper. The boy who had quietly rejected his mother's gospel of beauty had finally said so out loud. A year passed. I learned what happened next, not from Lior, not from Vivienne, or Gerald, but from a cousin of Lior's named Mark, who called one evening with the careful tone people use when delivering news they find both terrible and inevitable. Nadine had moved her parents into Cedar Brook Assisted Living. Not gradually, not after a medical event. She'd simply informed them one morning that the arrangement wasn't working. Her boyfriend didn't like the tension, her apartment was too small, their presence was affecting her energy. She drove them to the facility, signed the intake paperwork, and left before lunch. Mark said Gerald had stood in the lobby holding his suitcase looking at the door Nadine had walked through and hadn't moved for 15 minutes. I set the phone down after the call and sat with the information. I expected to feel vindicated. I searched for it, that hot, righteous bloom of times I told you so asterisk. It wasn't there. What I felt instead was a dull, familiar ache. The same ache I'd felt carrying that tray through the living room. The same ache I'd felt sitting in my car for 40 minutes. Not anger. Grief for people who couldn't stop destroying the bridges they stood on. Lior took it harder. He didn't cry. He went for a run at 10 o'clock at night and came back an hour later and stood in the shower until the water went cold. I didn't ask. I just left a towel on the hook in the hallway light on. Mark told me one more thing. Vivienne in the facility had been heard telling another resident that her son had been stolen by an ugly woman who tricked him and brought him to the streets, that the house had been taken from them, that they were victims of ingratitude. She was still performing, still curating the narrative. Even in a room she didn't choose surrounded by bodies that time, was softening and folding and diminishing the very process she'd spent a lifetime treating as moral failure she could not stop. Gerald, Mark said, mostly sat by the window. I asked Mark if they'd ever mentioned apologizing. He went quiet long enough that I knew the answer. No, he said, not once. I thanked him and hung up. That night I checked on my father. He was asleep in his accessible room in the house I'd paid for under a roof that nobody would take from him. My mother's photo watched from the nightstand. The grab bars gleamed faintly in the hallway light. I closed his door gently and stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob. The Ashfords had worshipped beauty like it was a savings account, something that would compound and protect them. But beauty doesn't compound. It spends. And when it's gone, what's left is only what you built with your hands and your choices and your willingness to love people who couldn't love you back. I had built this. They had built Cedarbrook. And the ugliest thing in the whole story was that they would never ever see it.
My stepmother Diane fancies herself an event planner. In reality, she's a control freak with a penchant for beige and a history of turning every family gathering into a hostage situation. So when I proposed to Jane, I knew we were in for a fight. "She just emailed the caterer," Jane said, her voice flat. She held her phone out to me, the screen glowing in the dim light of our living room. She sent them a suggested menu. It's all gluten-free, dairy-free, fun-free. I scanned the list. Quinoa salad, steamed asparagus, poached salmon. It was a menu for people who hate joy. I'll handle it. That's become my motto for the last 6 months, times I'll handle it. Asterisk. Handling it meant calling my father and explaining for the 10th time that this was our wedding, not Diane's retirement party. And my dad, bless his conflict-averse heart, would sigh and say, "Ben, you know how she is. She just wants to be involved." Involved is one thing, Dad. Hijacking is another. Just let her have her little suggestions. It keeps the peace. Keeping the peace was my father's life mission, a goal he pursued by sacrificing everyone else's peace on the altar of Diane. Jane and I aren't complicated. We have our little family, and it's all we need. There's me, her, our 10-month-old son, Leo, and Luke. Luke is Jane's half-brother. He's 4 years old, a whirlwind of dinosaur facts and sticky fingers. His mom, Jane's stepmom, passed away 2 years ago, and his dad took off. Jane, who was only 21 at the time, stepped up and got custody. When I met her, they were a package deal. It was the best deal I ever made. That kid is my son in every way that matters. Diane, however, sees it differently. She once told my aunt that Jane had baby-trapped me with someone else's kid. The logic is baffling, but hatred doesn't need logic. To her, Luke is a symbol of a life she can't control. He's the living, breathing proof that our family was formed without her input, and she can't stand it. Her meddling escalated weekly. She tried to change our venue, claiming the rustic barn we'd booked was a splinter factory. She tried to bully Jane's mom into changing the color of the bridesmaid dresses to, you guessed it, beige. Each time I'd call my dad. Each time I'd get the same response. "She means well, Ben." No, she doesn't. She told Jane that Luke looks unruly and shouldn't be in the wedding party. "He's 4, Dad. He's the ring bearer." A long pause on his end. "Well, you know weddings are stressful. People say things they don't mean." She meant it. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, me, Jane, and our kids. On the other, Diane and her army of flying monkeys, with my dad acting as her willing, spineless collaborator. The worst part was watching what it did to Jane. She was a rock, but even rocks erode under a constant drip of poison, I'd see her scrolling through venues on her phone late at night, a little crease of worry between her eyebrows. "What if we just eloped?" she whispered one night as Leo slept soundly in his crib next to our bed. "And let her win. No chance," I said, pulling her close. "This is our day. Our family. She doesn't get a vote." 2 weeks before the wedding, the new offensive began. Diane started circulating a different hotel block to my side of the family, one closer to her favorite salon. Then she called my best man, my oldest friend, to suggest he plan a more sophisticated bachelor party for me instead of the camping trip we'd had planned since we were teenagers. "She's trying to divide and conquer, Jane," said, pacing the kitchen while Luke chased our cat around the table. "She's creating her own version of the wedding and hoping people show up to that one instead." I finally lost it. I called my dad, my voice tight with a rage I'd been swallowing for months. "You have to get her under control. This stops now. Benjamin, your tone is completely unnecessary." My tone. She's actively sabotaging our wedding. She's hurting Jane. She's insulting my son. "Now, hold on," he said, his voice dropping into that placating murmur I hated. "She's just passionate. She feels left out. If you'd just given her one little thing to be in charge of..." "The one little thing she wants is control of everything, including our kids. And that's not on the table. It will never be on the table. Are we clear?" He huffed. "Fine. I'll talk to her." It was the same empty promise he always made. A verbal pat on the head to shut me up. But for a few days there was silence. A fragile, unnerving peace. We had our final tux fitting, picked up the rings, and went over the seating chart. For a moment it felt like we might actually make it. Then, Friday afternoon, our babysitter called. Her daughter had a sudden fever, a nasty one. She was apologetic, but she couldn't come. And we couldn't cancel. It was our final meeting with the officiant, the last thing on our checklist. "My mom's in Ohio until tomorrow," Jane said, chewing on her thumbnail. "Your aunt is at work." We ran through the list. Friends, neighbors. No one was available on such short notice. My stomach sank as I realized there was only one option left. "No," Jane said immediately, reading my face. "Ben, no. Not after everything." "It would just be for 2 hours," I pleaded already, hating myself. "Leo will be napping most of the time, and Luke can just watch his cartoons." "I'll call him. I'll make it crystal clear that Diane is not to come over. Under any circumstances. He owes us this. He owes times me times this." Jane looked from me to Luke, who was happily building a lopsided tower of blocks. Her eyes were filled with a deep primal mistrust that I should have listened to. But I was tired. I was desperate. I just wanted this one last thing to be easy. "Please, Janie. It'll be fine, I promise." She finally gave a reluctant nod, the doubt still etched on her face. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over my dad's contact photo. A wave of pure dread washed over me, cold and heavy. It was the kind of feeling you get right before you walk into a dark room where you know something is waiting. I ignored it. I pressed the button. "Hey, Dad," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "I've got a huge favor to ask." The silence on the drive home was heavier than any argument. 2 hours. That's all it was. We pulled into the driveway, and I could hear it through the closed car door, Leo's frantic, gasping cry. Not his usual hungry cry, but the sound of pure distress. "Something's wrong," Jane said, already unbuckling. I was out of the car before she was fumbling with my keys at the front door. The moment I opened it, the wail hit me full force. But it wasn't just Leo. From the living room came a second sound. A choked, terrified sobbing that ripped my heart out. It was Luke. We found them in a heap of misery. My dad was pacing, wringing his hands, while Diane was there. Her face, a mask of pinched fury, stood over the playpen where Leo was screaming himself red. Luke was huddled on the couch, knees to his chest, his face buried in a cushion. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "I told you she wasn't to come over." "Benjamin, calm down." My dad started his hands up in a placating gesture. There was a little disagreement. Jane ignored them completely. She swept past them straight to Luke. "Luke, honey, what is it? What's wrong?" He turned his head, and I saw it. A dark red split on his bottom lip, already starting to swell. A raw, angry mark on his small face. The world went quiet. All I could hear was a ringing in my ears. I looked from Luke's lip to Diane's face. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "What did you do?" My voice was dangerously low. "He was being a monster," she snapped, her voice shrill. "He got overexcited about the wedding, throwing pillows, and I had to get him to calm down." "Get him to calm down." Jane's voice was pure ice. She was cradling Luke's head, her thumb stroking his hair. "His lip is bleeding." "He fell," my dad mumbled. "He was jumping on the couch and he fell." "Liar," I said, looking straight at him. The word hung in the air, ugly and absolute. I turned back to Diane. "You hit him." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "I would never." "She called me not family," Luke whispered into Jane's shoulder, his little body trembling. "She said, 'I can't be the ring bearer.'" Rage, cold and clean, flooded my veins. It was so clarifying. All the months of placating, of handling it, burned away in an instant. There was no more gray area. There was only my son, hurt and terrified, and the monster who did it. "Get out," I said to Diane. She opened her mouth to argue, but the look on my face must have stopped her. "Get out of my house, now!" I took a step toward her, and for the first time in her life I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She grabbed her purse and scurried out the door. Then I turned to my father. He looked pathetic, deflated. "Ben, she didn't mean it. She just has a temper." "And you just let it happen," I finished for him. "You stood here and let her hurt a 4-year-old child. My son." "Get out, Dad. And don't come back." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "You don't mean that." "I have never meant anything more in my life. You are not welcome here." He left, closing the door softly behind him, the sound of it an admission of his own cowardice. The house was suddenly quiet, save for our children's ragged breaths. Jane was murmuring to Luke, wiping his tears, while I finally went and lifted Leo from his pen, his small body hot and damp against my chest. We held our kids. We just held them. After a few minutes, Jane looked up at me, her eyes glistening. The nanny cam, she whispered. I'd forgotten all about it. The little camera we kept on the mantelpiece to check on the kids. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the app and rewound the footage to an hour ago. We didn't watch. We listened. First, Diane's voice, saccharine and false. Then Luke's excited chatter about his special job as the ring bearer. Then Diane's tone shifted. Asterisk. That's not your job. You're not real family. You're just a problem your sister got stuck with. Asterisk. Luke's confused, hurt little voice. Asterisk. Yes, I am. Ben's my dad. Asterisk. Asterisk. He is not your father, times a shriek. Then a smacking sound, sharp and sickening, followed instantly by Luke's agonized cry. I closed the app. Jane was openly weeping now, a silent, furious grief. I saved the video file to my phone and then to the cloud. There was no question. There was no debate. We're going to the pediatrician in the morning, I said, my voice hard as stone, to get his lip documented. Then we're going to the police. The doctor was gentle, his face a careful professional blank as he examined Luke's mouth and took pictures. It's a good thing you brought him in, he said, handing Luke a sticker. Having a record of this is important. From there, we drove to the police station. It felt surreal sitting in a sterile room explaining to a tired-looking officer why my stepmother had assaulted my son. I played him the audio from my phone. I saw the officer's expression harden. He took our statement, a copy of the video file, and the pediatrician's report. You've done the right thing, he said. A detective will be in touch. We walked out into the sunlight, feeling hollowed out but certain. When we got home, my phone rang. It was my father. I just got a call from Diane. She was visited by a police officer. What in God's name did you do, Benjamin? His voice wasn't concerned. It was accusatory. I reported a crime, I said flatly. Child abuse. Child abuse. For God's sake, she tapped him on the mouth. You're tearing this family apart over a spoiled brat's tantrum. You need to call them, drop these charges, and apologize to Diane. She is your mother. She is not my mother. And I will see her in court before I ever see her at my wedding. She's uninvited. Officially. You can't do that. If she's not welcome, then neither am I, he blustered. I know, I said. I already told you that. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up before he could respond and blocked his number. Then I blocked Diane's. The fallout was immediate. A cascade of texts and calls from aunts, uncles, cousins. The story had already been spun times Ben and Jane are overreacting. Luke is a difficult child. Diane just lost her patience for a moment. They're trying to ruin her life over nothing. Asterisk. I didn't argue. I didn't engage. I sent the same simple message to every single person who contacted me in her defense. Asterisk. Diane put her hands on my 4-year-old son, splitting his lip because she was angry he was in our wedding. We have this on video. We have a doctor's report. We have filed a police report. The narrative you're hearing is a lie designed to protect an abuser. If you choose to side with her, that is your right. But you will not be a part of our lives or our children's lives. We are done. Asterisk. The responses dwindled. Some went silent. A few sent back angry tirades. My aunt called me a monster for putting my father through this. I blocked her too. Each block was a click of a lock securing the walls of our home. That evening, Jane's mom and stepdad came over. They brought pizza and played dinosaurs with Luke until he was laughing again, the cut on his lip the only reminder of yesterday. Later, after the kids were asleep, Jane and I sat on the porch. The guest list for the wedding was now about 30 people lighter. "Are you okay?" she asked, her hand finding mine in the dark. "I've never been better," I said, and I meant it. The weight of my father's expectations of Diane's endless drama, it was just gone. We lost a lot of people today. "No," she said, squeezing my hand. "We didn't lose anything. We just trimmed the fat." I looked at her, at the fierce, protective love in her eyes, and knew she was right. Our wedding wasn't going to be the big beige-colored affair Diane had wanted. It was going to be smaller, quieter. But it was going to be ours. And everyone there would be there because they loved our family, all of it. Unconditionally. Some days you just know you've won. For me, that day was about 6 months ago. I was sitting in my office, the one with the big glass window overlooking the whole operation, and I was watching them. My son John and his best friend Sam. They were standing over a blueprint on the hood of a dusty pickup, arguing, laughing, pointing. John sharp in his collared shirt, waving his tablet around, crunching the numbers. Sam's sleeves rolled up a pencil behind his ear, talking about load-bearing walls and supply chain. They were a perfect machine. My machine. And I thought times, this is it. This is everything I ever worked for. Asterisk. Miller Construction wasn't born in a boardroom. It was born in the back of my beat-up Ford with a second-hand circular saw and a toolbox my dad gave me. I built it with sweat and sawdust. By the time John was in high school, it was a respectable local business. I gave him a summer job, figuring it was time he learned the value of a hard day's work. He lasted 3 weeks. "Dad, this sucks," he told me one night, smelling of concrete dust and teenage indignation. "I'm covered in dirt, my back hurts, and Tony yelled at me for dropping a box of screws." Tony yells at everyone, John. It's how he says hello. And it's a construction site, you're supposed to get dirty. "It's not for me," he'd said, and that was that. He quit. I was disappointed, sure, but you can't force a kid to love the thing you love. The next day he brought Sam around. "Hey, Mr. Miller," Sam said, looking nervous but determined. "John said, you guys might have an opening. I'll do anything. Sweep, floors, carry, lumber, whatever." Sam was different. John's family had money, not my money, his mother's side. They were doctors and lawyers. Sam's dad was a mechanic who'd been laid off. Sam had a hunger I recognized because I saw it in the mirror every morning. So I hired him. And he didn't just sweep floors. He asked questions, he watched, he learned. He stayed late, came in early. While John was off getting a business degree from some fancy university, Sam was getting a master's in Miller Construction. He became the son I never had. No, that's not fair. He became the second-time son I didn't know I needed. He was there for the big expansion, the first multi-million-dollar contract, the time the whole market nearly collapsed in '08. 15 years he never wavered. He was my right hand, my successor in everything but name. Then, about 3 years ago, the prodigal son returned. John, 30 years old with a shiny MBA, and a few years at a sterile accounting firm under his belt, walked into my office. "Dad, I'm ready to come home," he announced. My wife Sarah was ecstatic. "Our boy finally seeing sense," she'd said. I was more cautious, but I was hopeful. He wasn't a kid anymore. He was a man. I gave him a job in finance, figuring it was a good fit for his degree. I expected him to treat it like a stepping stone, a corner office he was entitled to. I was wrong. He was brilliant. He streamlined our billing, renegotiated our loans, and found inefficiencies I hadn't seen in 30 years. He had a head for numbers that was frankly terrifying. And he got along with Sam. Better than got along. They'd been friends since kindergarten, and that bond was still there. They fell back into their old rhythm, but now it was in the context of my company. Our biggest client, a developer building a massive retail complex, was getting cold feet about costs. I brought John and Sam to the meeting. I watched them work. Sam would lay out the operational plan, his calm confidence soothing the client's fears about delays. "We can have the foundation poured in 6 weeks, frame up in 12. My guys are the best." Then John would step in with his tablet swiping through spreadsheets. "And I've run the numbers. If we pre-order the steel from this supplier instead of our usual one, we can hedge against the price increase we're projecting for Q3. It saves you 7%. Right here." They were a 1-to-2 punch of practicality and precision. We walked out of that meeting with the contract signed and a bigger budget than we'd walked in with. In the truck on the way back, I slapped the dashboard. "Damn fine work, you two. Damn fine." John grinned from the passenger seat. "We make a good team, Dad." From the back, Sam added, "Couldn't have done it without the numbers guy." It was perfect. It was a family business. My son, my protege, my legacy. For 3 years, it was like that. The company grew, profits soared. I was 58 years old, and for the first time I felt like I could actually breathe. I could step away. The machine I built would keep on running without me. So, I made my decision. Sarah helped me plan the dinner. She knew something was up. "You've got that look," she said. "The one you get when you're about to do something drastic." "It's not drastic, it's just time," I told her. We had everyone over. John, my daughter, Susan, who's a teacher and wants nothing to do with the business, and her husband. And Sam. Sam was always there for family dinners. The mood was light. We drank good wine. We laughed about old times. John told a story about him and Sam trying to build a treehouse that nearly fell on my prize-winning roses. Everyone was happy, relaxed. The perfect moment. After dessert, I tapped my glass with a fork. The chatter died down. Everyone looked at me smiling, expectant. "I have an announcement to make." I began my voice a little thicker than I expected. "As you all know, I'm not getting any younger. I've spent my life building this company, and it's time for me to finally step back. It's time to pass the torch." I looked around the table, at Susan, who was just happy for me, at Sarah, her eyes glistening with pride, at John, who was leaning forward, a confident, knowing smile playing on his lips. He thought he knew what was coming. I took a deep breath. I've spent months figuring out the best way to do this. The best way to ensure the future of Miller Construction and to be fair to everyone who has poured their life into it. I raised my glass, looking directly across the table past my own son. So it is with immense pride that I announce that the new majority owner and CEO of Miller Construction will be Sam. The silence in the room was a physical thing, heavy and cold. Sam's face went white, a statue carved from chalk. John's confident smile didn't just vanish. It shattered. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a disbelief so pure it was almost childlike. To finish, I said, trying to push through the sudden tension, the remaining 40% will be split evenly between my children. 20% for you, John, and 20% for you, Susan. John made a noise, a choked-off laugh that sounded like tearing metal. You're kidding me. He looked at Sam, then back at me. This is a joke. A really, really sick joke. It's not a joke, John, I said, my voice firm. It's a business decision. A business decision. He shot to his feet, the legs of his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. His napkin fell to the floor. I have an MBA from Wharton. I saved you 7 figures last year alone. He swung a hammer. You're giving times my times. Company, my birthright to the goddamn help. The word help hung in the air, ugly and venomous. Sam flinched like he'd been slapped. That's enough, I said, my own anger rising to meet his. Sam has given 15 years of his life to this company. He was here when you decided carrying lumber was beneath you. He built this with me. He earned it. Earned it, John's voice cracked. He earned my father's company. My grandfather's name is on the side of those trucks. What did he earn? Your loyalty? Is that what this is? You love him more than me, so you're giving him my life. Sarah put her hand on my arm. Levi, please, not like this. I shook her off. This isn't about love. It's about respect. It's about who has the experience and the dedication to run the whole operation, not just the balance sheets. Sam knows this business inside and out, from the foundation to the rooftop. You've been here for 3 years. 3 years of fixing your antiquated systems. 3 years of turning your glorified local crew into a modern, profitable enterprise. He pointed a shaking finger at me. I came home for you. For this. I thought we were building this together. Turns out I was just an employee auditioning for a minority stake in my own family's company while the golden boy was already anointed. He looked at Sam, his expression curdling into something I'd never seen before, pure hatred. You knew, didn't you, all those late nights with him going over plans? You knew he was going to screw me over. No, John, I swear, Sam stammered, holding up his hands. He looked utterly lost. I had no idea. Mr. Miller? Levi? I can't accept this. The decision is made, Sam, I said, cutting him off. That was the final straw. John threw his hands up in defeat. Unbelievable. You won't even listen to him. It was never a choice. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Congratulations, Dad. You finally got the son you always wanted. He didn't look at his mother. He didn't look at his sister. He just walked to the front door, yanked it open, and slammed it shut behind him. The vibration rattled the wine glasses on the table. The celebratory dinner was over. The next 3 days were a new kind of hell. A quiet, suffocating one. John didn't answer my calls. He didn't answer Sarah's. He'd sent a single curt email to HR announcing he was taking an indefinite leave of absence. The office felt like a morgue. Sam walked around like a ghost, his face etched with guilt and misery. He tried to talk to me twice. "Levi, we have to fix this," he'd said. "I don't want the company if it costs you your son." "It's not on you, Sam." I told him, though the words felt hollow even to me. The perfect machine I'd admired just a few days earlier was broken, its gears grinding to a halt. The joy of my impending retirement had curdled into a constant churning anxiety in my gut. I sat in my office staring out the big glass window, but the sight of the bustling workyard brought me no comfort. All I saw was the empty parking space where John's car should have been. On the fourth day, Susan showed up at the house. Sarah let her in, and the two of them spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen before Susan came into the study where I was pretending to read the newspaper. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "He's a wreck, Dad." "He's not answering my calls," I said, folding the paper. "What am I supposed to do?" "Maybe try to understand what you did," she shot back, her tone sharper than usual. She sat in the leather chair opposite my desk. "You publicly humiliated him. You held a dinner to celebrate his replacement. I was celebrating the future of the company. A company he is still getting 20% of for doing absolutely nothing." "Oh, stop it," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You know this isn't about the money." "Not for John. This is about Sam." I leaned back confused. "What does Sam have to do with it? He's innocent in all this." Susan sighed a deep, weary sound. "Dad, for as long as I can remember, you've talked about Sam. Sam just made foreman. Sam closed the Henderson deal. Sam reminds me of me when I was his age. You sent him to John's high school graduation because you were stuck on a job site too. States away. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. The concrete pour had gone wrong. I'd had to stay. I sent Sam in my place, told him to film the whole thing. At the time it seemed practical, a necessary sacrifice. John feels like he's been in a competition his whole life with his own best friend. Susan continued, her voice softening slightly. A competition he was always losing. He came home, he got the fancy degree you always said you wished you had. He worked his ass off for you for 3 years. He thought he'd finally won. He thought he'd finally made you proud. She leaned forward. That night, at dinner, you didn't just give Sam the company. You told John that he was right all along. That Sam was the son you always wanted, and he was just the backup. His birthright didn't matter. His degree didn't matter. He didn't matter. The words landed one by one, each finding a chink in my armor of logic and pragmatism. I had seen it as a business decision, a clean succession based on merit. I'd completely missed the emotional carnage. I hadn't just passed over my son. I had validated his deepest insecurity. "He wants to meet Susan," said, pulling me from my thoughts. "Just the two of you. Lunch tomorrow. The diner on Main." Hope, fragile and unwelcome, flickered in my chest. He does. "Don't get excited," she warned. "He's still furious. But he's willing to talk to you. No lawyers, no Sam, no Mom, just you and him." She stood up to leave. "And Dad, for God's sake, just listen to him." After she left, I walked over to my desk. The succession papers were in a neat pile right where I'd left them. Everything was drafted, just waiting for a few signatures to make it all real. My logical, pragmatic, defensible plan. A plan that had secured the future of my business, but had possibly shattered my family forever. I picked up the heavy stack of paper, the weight of it feeling immense in my hands. Tomorrow, I was having lunch with my son. And I had no idea if I was going to a negotiation or a final execution. The first year with Anna was easy. It was all brewery dates and stupid inside jokes and the kind of sex that makes you late for work. We were that couple. The one our friends secretly hated. We just fit. When she suggested we buy a house together, it felt like the most natural next step in the world. My credit was shot from a business I'd tried to start in my 20s, so the mortgage had to be in her name. "It's just a technicality, baby," she'd said, signing the papers with a flourish. "It's our Times house." The first box was barely unpacked when the cracks started to show. It started small. I'd left a cabinet door open. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped, slamming it shut, so hard the frame rattled. "Were you raised in a barn?" I stared at her. "Anna, what the hell? It's a cabinet!" Her face twisted. "It's not just a cabinet, it's about respect. You have no respect for our things. For Times, me, asterisk." The argument spiraled. My voice got louder to match hers. Then came the words that would become her favorite weapon. "You know what? If you don't like it, you can get the fuck out of my house." The air went out of my lungs. Asterisk. My Times house. The words hung between us, ugly and absolute. I slept on the couch that night. The next morning she was waiting for me in the kitchen with coffee tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Lucas," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. "I don't know why I said that. I was just so stressed. It's our house. I'll never say that again." She said it again 2 weeks later when I forgot to take out the recycling. And a month after that, when I was 5 minutes late coming home from work. Each fight got a little hotter. She shattered a coffee mug against the backsplash once. Another time she threw a picture frame, one of us smiling on vacation, so hard it splintered on the floor. And every single time the next morning brought the same apologies. The same promises. I started to live for the mornings, for that brief period of peace where the woman I fell in love with came back. I convinced myself the yelling and the breaking things was just the stress of the new mortgage. A phase. So when she brought up getting married, I thought, Times, yes, this will fix it. This will make us permanent. This will make it our home for real. Asterisk. I was a fool. The ring on her finger didn't change a thing. The fights got worse. The threats to kick me out became more frequent. I finally dragged her to couples counseling. We went 3 times. The third time, the therapist suggested Anna had trouble regulating her emotions. In the car on the way home, Anna was silent. Finally, she turned to me, her jaw set. "We're not going back," she said. "It wasn't a discussion." "Why not?" She was trying to help. "She's an idiot who doesn't know me. I'm not paying some woman $150 an hour to tell me I'm crazy. We're done with her." And we were. A week later, she sat me down on the couch, the same couch I'd slept on so many times before. She wouldn't look at me. "Lucas," she started, her voice unnervingly calm. "I love you. I just don't times you anymore." The words were a clean, cold slice. "What does that even mean, Anna?" "It means I can't do this. We have to call off the wedding." She finally looked up, and there wasn't a trace of sadness in her eyes. Just a flat, hard resolution. I felt the floor drop out from under me. All the fights, the apologies, the walking on eggshells, I had endured it all because I thought we were building a life, a future. Now she was tearing it down with a single sentence. "So that's it, you're just giving up." "I'm not giving up," she said, her voice rising. Asterisk. "You times gave up, you stopped trying, you made me this way." We lived like ghosts for the next month. The wedding was canceled, deposits were lost. We slept in the same bed but didn't touch. We existed in a thick, suffocating silence, punctuated only by her bitter sighs whenever I entered a room. I was numb, just trying to figure out how to untangle a life that was legally entirely hers. The breaking point didn't come from a fight. It came from a notification. Her phone was on the nightstand, face up. She was in the shower. It lit up with a text message. Asterisk. Asterisk. Mark. Work. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Asterisk. Asterisk. I read it once. Twice. A cold fire spread through my chest. Mark. The coworker, she'd been staying late with, the one she swore was just a friend. All the late nights, the team dinners, the sudden obsession with her phone, it all snapped into focus. I didn't say anything. I waited until she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming. I just held up the phone. Her face went from confusion to panic to a cold, hard defiance in the space of 3 seconds. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She snatched the phone from my hand. "You went through my phone. What is wrong with you?" "You cheated on me, Anna." She laughed. A short, ugly sound. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. I told you I didn't love you anymore. What did you expect was going to happen?" She blamed me. She cheated and she was blaming me. That was it. The last thread holding me together snapped. The love, the hope, the memory of that first easy year, it all curdled into pure, undiluted rage. She stood there so smug, so certain of her power over me in the house that was in her name with the life she was systematically dismantling. But she'd forgotten one thing. Mark. Mark had a life too. I remembered her mentioning it once, laughing about how clueless his wife was. Sarah, I think her name was. I walked out of the bedroom, my hands shaking. I grabbed my laptop, sat down at the kitchen island, and typed Mark Reynolds and his company name into Facebook. There he was. Profile picture of him and a smiling blonde woman. His wife, Sarah. Her profile was public. Photos of their 2 little kids beamed from the screen. A perfect family. My heart hammered against my ribs. Anna had torched my life and felt nothing. She thought she could just walk away clean. I clicked on Sarah Reynolds' profile. The message button seemed to glow on the screen. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the mouse. My finger clicked. The message was sent. I attached a screenshot of the text from Mark's phone. No commentary, just the evidence. I closed the laptop. The silence in the house was absolute, a vacuum waiting for the coming storm. That night I didn't sleep on the couch. I went out. I went to a bar I hadn't been to in years, a dive with sticky floors and cheap whiskey. I got drunk. Not buzzed, not happy drunk, but obliteration drunk. I met a woman whose name I think was Jessica. We went back to her apartment. The whole thing was mechanical, a desperate and pathetic attempt to prove something to myself. I left before the sun was up, the taste of regret thick and metallic in my mouth. It hadn't made me feel powerful. It had made me feel cheap. It was a hollow, pointless act, and the only person I'd managed to hurt was myself. I was nursing a hangover in a pot of black coffee when Anna got home the next day. The front door slammed open so hard it hit the wall, leaving a fresh dent in the drywall. Her face was a mask of pure fury. She threw her purse at me. I ducked and it hit the cabinets with a heavy thud. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't you lie to me, Lucas. Don't you dare," Sarah Reynolds called the office. She called HR. She called Mark's boss. She sent them everything. I just looked at her, my coffee cup steady in my hands. And they suspended him pending an investigation. I had to sit there while my boss looked at me like I was some piece of trash. So I quit. I told them all to go to hell. She was pacing now, a caged animal. "This is all your fault. You couldn't just leave it alone. You had to destroy everything." Asterisk. I times destroyed everything. I laughed a bitter, broken sound. "Anna, you were sleeping with him. You threw away our engagement. You did this." "I did it because of you," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You suffocated me. You made me miserable, and now you've ruined my career, my life." I just shook my head and took another sip of coffee. I was empty. Her rage couldn't even touch me. The next few weeks were a new kind of hell. She stayed in the guest room. We didn't speak. Then one day I came home, and she was sitting at the kitchen island, a grim smile on her face. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I'm never going to be happy again, Anna." "What is it now?" I reported Mark to the IRS. For tax fraud. He's been skimming from freelance projects for years, bragging about it to me. She took a sip of wine. His life is over. His wife took the kids, and now the government is going to take the rest. He deserves it. I stared at her, horrified. "Why would you do that?" "For revenge," she said, looking right at me. "Something you should understand." The letter came a month later. It was from a law firm. Anna was being sued. Mark was claiming she was an active participant in the fraud, that her report was malicious retaliation after he broke off their affair. He was suing her for defamation, conspiracy, and emotional distress. The number on the paper made me feel sick. $500, 000. She slid it across the island to me. "Look," she whispered, her voice finally breaking. "Look what you've done. You ruined my life, my job, any chance we ever had of even being friends. I hope you're satisfied." She refused any more counseling. She refused to speak to me unless it was to blame me for the lawsuit for her unemployment for the goddamn weather. We lived in that house together for 2 more agonizing months, 2 ghosts haunting the memory of a life we'd once planned. The air was thick with hatred. Finally, my name was taken off the non-existent lease. I packed my things into cardboard boxes and I left the house that had never been mine. 6 months passed in a blur of cheap apartments and meaningless work. The lawyers handled everything. I didn't see her again until we met in a sterile conference room to sign the final papers. She was thinner. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out sadness. She sat across from me, fiddling with the pen. "Hey," she said softly. "Anna." Our lawyers did the talking. We just sat there, the silence between us heavier than ever. My lawyer slid the papers in front of me. I uncapped my pen, my hand ready. This was it. The final cut. "Lucas, wait," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I looked up. There were tears welling in her eyes. The same tears I'd seen 100 times after 100 fights. She started shaking her head. "Seeing you here, it just feels so final. So wrong." My heart stuttered. The lawyer cleared his throat, but I didn't look away from her. "Sometimes I think," she continued, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, "that maybe we just gave up too easily. Maybe if we had fought harder, I don't know. I just get so sad thinking about what we lost." There it was, the manipulation. So much quieter this time, but just as potent. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of fault. It was a poisoned dart of doubt, designed to find its way into the cracks of my resolve. To make me wonder times what if asterisk. To make me share the burden of her destruction. My lawyer nudged the papers. "Mr. Hayes." I looked at Anna's sad, beautiful, broken face. The woman I had loved. The woman who had systematically torn my world apart and then blamed me for the rubble. She wasn't offering a future. She was just trying to pull me back into her misery to make sure I was as unsettled as she was. I took a deep breath, the air tasting like stale regret. I signed my name. Each letter was a small act of violence, a final severing. I stood up and walked out of that room without looking back. I was legally free. But as the elevator doors closed, her words echoed in my head. Asterisk, maybe we gave up too easily. Asterisk, I knew it was a lie. I knew I had done the only thing I could. But the doubt was there a tiny, toxic seed she had planted right at the finish line. I wasn't in hell anymore, but this wasn't freedom. It was just purgatory. The text message lit up my phone with the sterile glow of a bomb's countdown timer. Asterisk, Mom, Paul, we need to talk. Family meeting. Call me. Asterisk. I stared at it, a greasy wrench in my hand. My knuckles were bleeding again from fighting with the garbage disposal under my new kitchen sink. Asterisk. My Times sink. In Times, my Times house. A house I bought 6 months ago after 3 years of sleeping in my car on couches, and one particularly brutal winter in a shelter. The last time I'd had a family meeting, my key no longer worked in the front door of their house, and my belongings were sitting in a trash bag on the porch. I was 18. I wiped my hands on a rag, tossed the wrench into the sink with a clang, and dialed. Paul, honey, I'm so glad you called. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she only used when she was about to ask for something big. What do you want, Mom? No preamble. No, how are you? We didn't have that kind of relationship. Can't a mother just want to see her son? We haven't seen your new house yet. We're so proud of you. You know where I live. You've never come by. A sigh, heavy and practiced. The sound of a martyr mounting her cross. Well, your father and I and Dan, we thought we could all go out to dinner. Our treat. Just to catch up. Dan? Of course. The golden child. The reason for every emergency, every faked crisis, every dollar they ever had. I'm busy, I said. Paul, please. It's important. The sweetness in her voice curdled into a whine. Dan's having a hard time. I almost laughed. When is Dan not having a hard time? That's not fair. His wife, Sarah, she's just very difficult. She makes life impossible for him, for all of us. He can't get ahead. I leaned against my own kitchen counter, the cool granite, a solid reminder of everything I'd built without them. And this requires a family meeting with me. We just need to talk. As a family. Please. For me. The old guilt, a familiar phantom, pricked at my conscience. I hated it. I hated them for installing it. And I hated myself for letting it still have any power. Fine, I said, my voice flat. The steakhouse on Market Street. Tomorrow. 7 o'clock. If you're a minute late, I'm leaving. Oh, thank you, baby. You won't regret this. I hung up. I knew I already did. The next night I walked into the restaurant at 7 on the dot. They were already there, huddled in a corner booth like refugees. My father, looking older and smaller than I remembered, fiddled with a sugar packet. My mother gave me a watery smile. And Dan looked like a cornered animal. His expensive clothes were rumpled, his face was puffy, and he vibrated with a nervous energy that made my teeth ache. Paul, you made it, my mother chirped, a little too loud. I slid into the booth opposite them. The silence was thick enough to chew. A waitress came and took our drink orders. I ordered a whiskey neat. They all ordered water. So my father cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative. It didn't work anymore. Your mother tells me you're doing well. The house is good. It's fine, I said. Must be nice, Dan muttered, staring daggers at the breadbasket. Having so much space, so much quiet. My mother put a placating hand on his arm. Now, Danny. Paul worked hard. She turned her plastic smile on me. We know you did. It's just... Well, things have been tough. Sarah is spending every penny Dan makes. He can't save a thing. She's threatening to leave him if he doesn't buy her a bigger house, one like yours. That's a Dan problem, I said, taking a sip of my whiskey. The burn was clarifying. It's a family problem, she insisted. He's living in our basement again, and frankly, she's making our lives a living hell. We can't take it anymore. I looked at my brother, the golden boy who could do no wrong. The one who got a new car for his 16th birthday while I was told to get a job to pay for my own bus pass. The one whose college tuition was paid in full while I was told community college was a waste of money. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just glared at the table, radiating pure, uncut entitlement. So, what does this have to do with me? I asked, keeping my voice level. My father leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. The old bully was trying to surface. This was it. The pitch. He dropped the folksy concerned dad act and got straight to the point. Your brother's credit is shot. Completely worthless. He can't get a loan, can't even get approved to rent a decent apartment. Sarah is going to walk and take the kids if he doesn't get them out of our basement. He paused, letting the manufactured drama hang in the air. I just stared at him, my face a blank mask. I refused to give him anything. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. We need you to help your brother. We need you to fix this. Fix this, I let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. It was a sound like breaking glass. You're asking me to fix it? My mother jumped in her voice, trembling with manufactured urgency. Paul, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. We just need a little help to get them on their feet. We thought maybe you could give Dan the down payment for a small house. 20, maybe 30,000, or if that's too much, you could just co-sign on an apartment lease for him. Just for a year, to give him a chance. There it was. The payload. The reason for the free steak dinner they were never going to pay for. They wanted me to either hand over a life-altering sum of money I didn't have, or legally chain myself to my brother's inevitable financial implosion. I looked from my mother's pleading face to my father's stony glare. Then I looked at Dan, who was staring at me with the raw, desperate hunger of a wolf. No, I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. Dan's face contorted, twisting from desperation into pure, unadulterated rage. No, what the hell do you mean? Times, no times, he hissed, his voice rising with every word. He slammed his fist on the table, making the water glasses jump. Look at you, sitting there in your fancy shirt, drinking your expensive whiskey. You have a whole house all to yourself. We're drowning and you won't even throw us a damn life raft. I have a family, I have kids. What do you have? Nothing. You owe us. You owe times me, asterisk. The outburst was everything I expected. The classic Dan tantrum. But instead of the anger he wanted to fight he was trying to start, I felt a strange and sudden calm. The old hooks of guilt and obligation had nothing to purchase on. They just slid right off. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, set the glass down with a deliberate click, and leaned forward, my voice low and even. Owe you. Let's talk about what I owe you. I looked directly at my parents. Remember when I called you from a payphone after my car broke down? It was January. I was 18 and sleeping in that Civic. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I asked if I could just come home for one night just to get warm. "And you," I nodded, "at my father told me that I'd made my bed and it was time to grow up and lie in it." Then you hung up. My father's face went pale. My mother started to sniffle. "My house." I continued, my gaze shifting to Dan. "The mortgage is $2,132 a month. My truck payment, the one I need for work, is $500 to $160. Add in insurance, utilities, property, taxes, and food. And after a 60-hour work week, I have about $300 left over. That's it. That's my so much. I'm not rich, Dan. I'm one blown transmission away from being right back in that Walmart parking lot." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The cold, hard numbers were louder than his shouting ever could be. "You're a senior project manager at a tech firm. I saw your promotion on LinkedIn. You clear what, 120 grand a year? I'm a mechanic. I make 65 on a good year. You earn almost double what I do. So don't you dare sit there and tell me I have so much, when you and your wife piss away a fortune on crap you can't afford." I let that sink in. The silence in the booth was absolute. The background chatter of the restaurant seemed a million miles away. Then I delivered the final blow. I looked at my parents, who were now staring at their hands in their laps, utterly defeated. But here's the most telling part of this whole pathetic little play. "You two," I said, my voice softening just enough to make the words cut deeper. "You won't even co-sign for him. You know he's a black hole. You know he'll default and ruin your credit, maybe even risk your own home. You want me to light myself on fire to keep your precious golden child warm, but you won't even risk getting your own fingers burnt." Dan just stared at me, his mouth hanging open. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow, slack-jawed shock. He had no response. There wasn't one. I had taken his narrative, his lifetime of entitlement, and methodically dismantled it with the truth. He shoved back from the table, his chair screeching against the floor. "I hate you," he spat the words, lacking any real venom. They were just the last gasp of a spoiled child. He turned and stormed out of the restaurant, slamming the door behind him. My mother began to sob quietly into her napkin. My father, the man who had once been my biggest bully, just looked old. Small. Beaten. I flagged down the waitress. "They'll have the filet mignon medium rare," I said, nodding to my parents. "And whatever else they want. A bottle of wine, dessert, the works. It's on me." I slid a $100 bill onto the table. "For a tip?" I stood up and put on my jacket. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, not looking at them. "It's the last thing you'll ever get from me." I walked out of that restaurant and didn't look back. The air outside was cool and clean. I felt light. The next day, the attack came just as I knew it would. Not from them, but from Sarah's army. A cousin I'd never met sent me a scathing Facebook message about being a heartless monster. An old family friend commented on a 2-year-old photo on my Instagram, calling me selfish. The flying monkeys had been released. 10 years ago, it would have destroyed me. 5 years ago, it would have sent me into a spiral of rage and anxiety. I sat on the porch of my Times house, a cold beer in my hand, and looked at the message from the unknown cousin. I tapped the screen. Asterisk, block user, asterisk. A notification popped up for the Instagram comment. I tapped again. Asterisk. Block user. Asterisk. With each press of a button, I felt another invisible chain breaking. They had no power here. Their words were just ghosts rattling at windows they could no longer break. The war was over. I had finally won. I used to iron my husband's socks. Not just his shirts or his trousers, but his socks. Mark liked the seams to be perfectly flat against his toes. He said it was one of the little things I did that made him feel taken care of. So I did it. I also made his lunch every day, a 3-course affair packed into neat little containers. I cut the crusts off his sandwiches. He was a grown man, a partner at a law firm, and I treated him like a toddler in a tie. I thought that was love. Babied, he called it. You baby me, he'd laugh, kissing my forehead before he left for work. The day it all ended, I found his phone on the counter next to the artisan bread I'd baked for his crustless sandwich. It buzzed. A message from Kay. My best friend Kylie. My maid of honor. Asterisk. Can't stop thinking about last night. You're intoxicating. Asterisk. I didn't feel a thing at first. Just a cold, clean nothingness. Then I saw the picture she'd sent. A selfie. Her in my bed with the corner of Mark's shoulder visible beside her. My hand didn't even shake as I scrolled up. Weeks of it. Months. Plans made while I was out buying organic flour for his goddamn bread. When he walked out of the shower whistling, I was still standing there, phone in hand. The look on his face wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. You went through my phone. She was in our bed, Mark. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. My best friend. In our bed. He took a towel and scrubbed it over his hair. Honestly, Joan, what did you expect? He gestured vaguely at me, at my sweatpants and old t-shirt. You let yourself go. You turned into this. A maid. You stopped being interesting. Kylie makes me feel alive. He said it so casually, like he was explaining why he'd switched coffee brands. He packed a bag while I stood frozen in the kitchen. He took the car. He took the life I had meticulously built for him. By the end of the week, I was out of the house too. Our house. Except, it was never really our Times house. It was his. I was just the live-in sock ironer. A nobody. I landed on my friend Chloe's couch with a single suitcase and a shattered sense of self. I cried for 3 days straight. On the 4th day, my mom showed up. She didn't hug me or offer platitudes. She handed me a 50-pound bag of flour. You've spent a decade putting your love on a plate for that man, she said, her voice like gravel. It's the only thing that's ever made you truly happy. Time to start cooking for yourself. Build something that's yours and yours alone. So I did. I started small baking from Chloe's tiny apartment kitchen. I called my little venture the Flower Pot. I baked my anger into sourdough, my grief into decadent chocolate tortes, and my hope into airy, delicate macarons. Chloe, a marketing genius, built me a website and an Instagram account. The orders started as a trickle, then a stream, then a flood. Within a year, I had my own commercial kitchen space. Within 2, I had a small staff and a reputation as the best artisan baker in the city. I wasn't just Joan, the pathetic ex-wife. I was Joan, the owner of the flower pot. I had flour under my fingernails instead of tears on my cheeks. I had a new apartment, a new sense of purpose. I was a somebody built from scratch by my own 2 hands. 3 years after Mark walked out, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, busy piping buttercream onto a wedding cake, but something made me answer. Hello. Joanne? It's me. The voice was thin, reedy. Unfamiliar, but I knew it instantly. Kylie. I almost hung up. What do you want? I needed to talk to you. A sniffle. He's not who I thought he was, Joe. He still expects his socks ironed. He complains about my cooking. He's always working, and when he's home, he's miserable. She let out a sob. I'm so lonely. I miss you. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I felt a cold, hard calm settle over me. You made your bed, Kylie. Now you get to lie in it with him. I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call and blocked the number. A week later, an email landed in the flower pot's inbox. It was the biggest catering request I'd ever received. A first birthday party, a massive budget, 4-tiered cake, hundreds of custom-designed cookies, dessert tables, savory, pastries. It was a game changer. The kind of job that would let me lease the retail space next door and finally open the storefront I'd been dreaming of. The inquiry came from a high-end event planner. The client names were withheld standard for big-money gigs. I drew up the contract, my heart pounding with excitement, and sent it over. The planner replied within the hour. Asterisk. Contract looks great, we're a go. Here are the final details for the event. Asterisk. Asterisk. Client names Mark and Kylie Peterson. Asterisk. Asterisk. Event, birthday party for their son Leo. Asterisk. Asterisk. Location 1214 Sycamore Lane. Asterisk. My old address. My old house. My hands started shaking. I sank onto a flour-dusted stool, the contract glowing on my laptop screen. This wasn't just a job. It was a summons. A test. Reject it. That was the safe answer. Protect myself. I didn't need their money or their drama. But the other part of me, the part that had clawed her way out of that pit of despair, whispered something else. This was a chance. Not just for my business, but for me. A chance to walk back into that house not as the woman who ironed his socks, but as the professional he couldn't live without. A chance to prove that the best thing he ever did for me was leave. Chloe found me staring at the screen an hour later. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I said, turning the laptop towards her. A job offer from a couple of them. She read it, her eyes widening. Oh, hell no. You're not doing it. Absolutely not. But the money, Chloe. This is the expansion. This is everything we've worked for. It's a trap. It's an emotional minefield. Don't you see she calls you crying, and a week later this lands in your lap? She wants to show you what she has. Your house, your husband, a baby. And I want to show her what I have, I shot back, my voice firmer than I felt. A successful business. A life I built myself. Happiness. The debate raged for hours. My fear versus my pride. My emotional safety versus the opportunity of a lifetime. Late that night, long after Chloe had gone to bed, I stood alone in my kitchen, the smell of sugar and yeast filling the air. This place was my sanctuary. This business was my armor. I walked back to my laptop, my reflection a faint outline on the dark screen. I looked strong. I looked like a woman who was no longer afraid of her own past. I opened the email, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about Mark's smug face and Kylie's pathetic whining voice. I thought about the woman I used to be crying on a couch and the woman I was now the boss. My fingers flew across the keys. Asterisk. Subject reconfirmed. Peterson. Event asterisk. Asterisk. Dear Miss Albright. Asterisk. Asterisk. Thank you for confirming. We are delighted to accept the engagement. Please find the finalized invoice and our deposit requirements attached. We look forward to making this event a memorable one. Asterisk. Asterisk. Sincerely. Asterisk. Asterisk. Joan Maxwell. Asterisk. Asterisk. Owner, the flower pot. Asterisk. I hit send. There was no going back now. The day of the party, I pulled up to my old house in a commercial van with the flower pot logo emblazoned on the side. Alex was in the passenger seat, his hand resting on my thigh. He'd insisted on coming. Not as a bodyguard, but as my head of logistics for the day. He was a calm, steady architect who knew more about structural integrity than buttercream, but his presence was the only thing keeping my heart from jackhammering its way out of my chest. "You good?" he asked, squeezing my leg. "I'm the caterer," I said, more to myself than to him. "Here to do a job." The house was different. The rose bushes I'd painstakingly nurtured were gone, replaced by a sterile, modern rock garden. A giant inflatable bouncy castle in the shape of a blue whale dominated the lawn where Mark and I used to have picnics. It was a home, I recognized, but the soul had been scooped out. My team and I were a well-oiled machine. We set up the dessert tables with military precision. The four-tiered cake, a whimsical masterpiece of fondant animals, took center stage. Hundreds of cookies shaped like lions and bears and iced with the name Leo were arranged on platters. Everything looked perfect. Professional. Untouchable. I saw Kylie across the lawn, directing a balloon artist. She looked thin, her smile tight and brittle. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first mixer, but she looked exhausted. We made eye contact for a split second. I gave her a crisp, professional nod. The kind you give a client. Her face fell. The first person to approach me wasn't Mark or Kylie. It was Arthur Mark's dad. He'd always been kind to me, a quiet man who appreciated my cooking far more than his son ever did. "Joan," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He pulled me into a gentle hug. "My God, look at you. You're radiant." He gestured to the tables. "And this is art. We always knew you had this in you." "Thank you, Arthur. It's good to see you." He lowered his voice slightly. "I saw your feature in the city magazine. My wife and we were so proud." He glanced over his shoulder toward Mark, who was awkwardly trying to make conversation with another dad. "He's a fool, Joan. Always was. Never knew a good thing when he had it." That simple, honest validation felt like a shield clicking into place around me. An hour later, the shield was tested. Mark cornered me by the savory pastry table. He looked older, softer around the middle. The confidence he used to wear like a bespoke suit was gone, replaced by a weary slump. "Joni," he started. "That old nickname." "It's Joan," I said, my voice even. I didn't look up from refilling a tray of many quiches. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. Peterson?" He flinched. "Come on. Don't be like that." He picked up a quiche. "This is incredible. Just like I remember." He took a bite and closed his eyes for a moment. "God, I miss your cooking." "Kylie." She tries, but it's just not the same. "Nothing is." I finally looked at him. The man who told me I'd let myself go, that I was uninteresting. All I felt was a profound, hollow pity. "Well, you can hire the flower pot any time. Our rates are on the website." Alex chose that moment to walk up, slipping a protective arm around my waist. "Everything okay over here, honey?" His presence was casual, but his message was clear. Mark's eyes flickered to Alex's arm around me, then back to my face. A flicker of something jealousy, regret crossed his features. "Right," he mumbled, setting the half-eaten quiche down. "Business." "Of course." He shuffled away, looking defeated. Across the garden I saw Kylie watching us, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was a mask of pure misery. She knew exactly what that interaction meant. He had come to me, not her. Even here at their son's party in my old house, she was losing. We packed up as the party wound down. The event planner, a woman with a fearsome reputation, handed me the final check. "Absolutely flawless, Joan," she said, pressing her card into my hand. "I'll be calling you." "For everything." The check was for the full amount, plus a hefty tip. Enough to sign the lease on the retail space tomorrow. I tucked it into my pocket, the crisp paper, a tangible symbol of my victory. As Alex and I loaded the last of the crates into the van, Kylie hurried over. Her makeup was slightly smudged. "Joan, wait." I turned my face impassive. "The cake was beautiful," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything was." She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry. For everything. I was so unhappy and I took what you had." It was the apology I'd once thought I needed to hear. Now it just sounded pathetic. self-serving. It wasn't for me. It was for her to absolve her own guilt. "I know," I said. And that was all. I didn't offer forgiveness. I didn't offer absolution. I just acknowledged her pathetic confession. I turned and got into the van, leaving her standing alone in the driveway of the house she'd stolen. In the car, Alex took my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I just closed the heaviest door of my life," I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. "Let's go get dinner. Somewhere fancy. My treat." As we drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. Asterisk. "Just so you know, they're having a screaming match in the kitchen. Apparently Mark told her your quiche was the best thing he had eaten in 3 years. Thank you again for today. You're a class act." Asterisk. I showed the text to Alex. He whistled softly. "Wow." I looked down at the check in my hand, then at the man beside me, the man who saw me as a partner, not a maid. The best revenge wasn't the fight they were having in my old kitchen. It wasn't the pathetic apology or the regret in Mark's eyes. The best revenge was the weight of this check in my pocket. It was the keys to my new storefront. It was the quiet, solid feel of Alex's hand in mine. It was the decision made with absolute certainty as we drove off into the night that I was done. I'd walk through the fire and come out the other side, not burned but forged. I would never ever work for them again. I didn't need to. I had already won. The scent of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching Mark's bolognese sauce simmer on the stove. It was his favorite. The one I'd perfected over 7 years of trying to be the perfect wife. On the counter, my old portfolio case collected dust, a relic from a life where Elara the artist wasn't a forgotten dream. I traded my ambitions for his, my desires for our shared future. We'd agreed to wait on kids until his architecture firm was stable. The firm was now thriving. We were still waiting. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the cold granite. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, probably another spam call about my car's extended warranty. But something made me answer. "Hello? Is this Elara Vance?" A man's voice. Low and steady, but with an undercurrent I couldn't place. "It is. Who's calling?" A pause. I could hear the faint sound of traffic on his end. "My name is Sam. We don't know each other, but I think we need to talk. It's about my wife Chloe and your husband Mark." My blood went cold. I gripped the counter, the wine glass slick in my palm. "I don't understand." "I think you do," he said, his voice void of any malice, which somehow made it worse. It was just a statement of fact. "Can you meet me? Half an hour. The Black Cat Cafe on Miller." He hung up before I could answer. The bolognese bubbled on the stove. I turned the burner off. The rich, comforting smell now turned my stomach. I grabbed my keys, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The Black Cat Cafe was one of those sterile, soulless places with bad art and worse coffee. It was perfect. Anonymous. Sam was already there, sitting in a booth in the back corner. He looked normal. Mid-40s, tired eyes, a wedding band that looked as worn as mine. He stood when I approached. "Hey, Lara. Thank you for coming." I just nodded, sliding into the vinyl seat across from him. My hands were shaking. I tucked them under the table. He didn't waste time with small talk. He pushed a plain manila folder across the table. It landed with a soft final thud. "I hired a private investigator a month ago," he said, his voice flat. "I had to be sure." I stared at the folder. It felt like a bomb. Opening it would detonate my entire life. My fingers trembled as I flipped the metal clasp. The first photo was Mark. He was laughing, head thrown back, a look of pure, unadulterated joy on his face. A look I hadn't seen in years. His arm was draped around a blonde woman. She was beautiful, vibrant. They were sitting on a park bench, sharing an ice cream cone like a couple of teenagers. I flipped to the next photo. Them checking into a hotel. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, the day of Mark's unavoidable sight meeting in the city. Another photo. The two of them kissing tangled together outside a restaurant. It wasn't a peck. It was a deep, hungry kiss. The kind he hadn't given me since our honeymoon. A wave of nausea washed over me. The cafe's stale air felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I looked up at the man across from me, this stranger who had just handed me the wreckage of my marriage. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. His eyes, a deep, sad brown, met mine. There was no victory in them, only a shared, hollowed-out pain. "That's Chloe," he said quietly. "She's my wife." The words hit me harder than the pictures. It wasn't just some random woman. This was a whole other life. A whole other betrayal mirrored and entwined with my own. We were two halves of the same ugly secret. "They've been—" "Careful," he continued, his gaze dropping to the table. "Met through a design conference 6 months ago. My PI said it's serious." Serious. The word twisted in my gut. My 7-year marriage, the life I'd put on hold, the children I'd yearned for, all of it was being bulldozed by a serious 6-month affair. I closed the folder. My hands were steady now. The shaking had been replaced by a strange, icy calm. The shock was hardening into something else. Something sharp and cold. "What do you want from me?" I asked. He looked surprised by the question. "I don't want anything. I just thought you had a right to know. To not be the fool. I'm telling Chloe tonight." I stood up the vinyl of the booth, groaning in protest. "Thank you, Sam." The words felt foreign in my mouth. I should have been crying, screaming. Instead, I felt nothing. A vast, empty void where my heart used to be. He just nodded. "I'm sorry, Alara." I walked out of the cafe, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. The drive home was a blur. Fragments of my life with Mark flashed through my mind. His promises, his excuses for working late, the way he'd started turning over in his sleep, his back a permanent wall between us. It all clicked into place, the fuzzy picture of my life snapping into brutal, perfect focus. I let myself into the house. It was quiet. Dark. The bolognese sat cold on the stove. I walked through the living room we'd decorated together, past the photos on the mantel of a happy, smiling couple who no longer existed. I sat on the edge of our bed, the manila folder in my lap. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The images were burned onto the back of my eyelids. I waited. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall counted down the seconds of my old life. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Finally, headlights swept across the bedroom window. The engine cut. A car door slammed. I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, my spine straight, the air in my lungs turning to ice. I was a judge, a jury, an executioner. I heard his keys jingle. The sound of one sliding into the lock. The deadbolt turned with a heavy final click. The door swung inward. Mark stepped inside, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Hey, sorry, I'm late." Traffic was. He stopped when he saw me sitting on the bed in the dark. "El, what's wrong? You didn't even turn on the lights." I didn't answer. I just slid the manila folder from my lap onto the white duvet. It was the only thing between us. He squinted, then flipped the bedside lamp on. The soft glow illuminated the folder. He looked at it, then at my face. My expression must have told him everything. He didn't even try to lie. His shoulders slumped the fight, leaving him in one long, pathetic sigh. "Elara, I can explain." "Don't," I said. My voice was unnervingly steady. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. Just tell me one thing. Do you love her?" He sank onto the foot of the bed, his back to me. He ran a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple." "It's the simplest question in the world, Mark." He was silent for a long time. The clock in the hall ticked away the last remnants of our marriage. Finally he whispered, "I don't know." That was the answer. I stood up. "I want a divorce!" His head snapped up. Panic flared in his eyes. No. No, wait. El, we can fix this. I'll end it with her. Tonight. I'll call her right now. It was a mistake. A huge, stupid mistake. Please don't throw 7 years away." "You threw them away," I said, my voice cold and clear. "You did it every Tuesday at 2:14 p.m. You did it over park benches and ice cream cones. This isn't something we fix, Mark. This is an ending." The divorce was ugly and swift. Our shared life was divided up with brutal efficiency by lawyers. The only person who understood was Sam. We talked on the phone a few times a week, two soldiers swapping stories from the same war. He told me about his daughter Maya and how Chloe was trying to turn her against him. I told him about selling the house and finding a small apartment with a spare room I could finally turn into a studio. We met for coffee a month before the final papers were signed. He looked tired, but the hollowed-out pain in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet resolve. "I find myself looking for your name on my phone," he admitted, stirring a packet of sugar into his black coffee. "I do the same," I confessed. A spark flickered between us. It was tiny, fragile, but it was there. And it terrified me. "Elara," he said, putting his spoon down and looking right at me. "I think I could really fall for you, but not like this. Not when we're both still crawling out of the wreckage." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I know. So let's make a deal, he said, his voice firm. 1 year. From the day our divorces are final, we don't see each other, we don't talk, we heal separately. If in 365 days you're still thinking about me, call me. Or I'll call you. It was the most sensible, mature, and deeply romantic thing a man had ever said to me. Okay, Sam. 1 year. On the 365th day, my phone rang at 10 in the morning. Is this offer still good? Sam's voice was a low, warm rumble that I remembered perfectly. My heart hammered. I was just about to call you. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound. Dinner Friday night, La Sponda. It was the most expensive restaurant in the city. The kind of place Mark would have taken a client, not me. Yes, I said, a smile spreading across my face. Definitely, yes. Friday came, but at 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Asterisk. Sam, I am so sorry. Maya just spiked a fever. The doctor thinks it's strep. I can't leave her. I have to cancel. Asterisk. The old Alara would have felt a sting of disappointment, a familiar pang of being put second. But I wasn't her anymore. Asterisk. Me. Don't you dare apologize. Be a dad. I'll call you in a few days. Asterisk. An hour later, I was standing on his doorstep holding a large container of my mom's chicken noodle soup. When he opened the door, he looked exhausted and surprised. What are you doing here? He whispered, glancing back toward the sound of a small cough from inside. Fever protocol, I said, holding up the container. No strings attached. Just go take care of your little girl. I saw it in his eyes then, the same flicker from the coffee shop, now a steady flame. He didn't try to kiss me. He didn't even touch me. He just held my gaze for a long moment. Thank you, Alara. Our rescheduled date was the following Wednesday. The chemistry was instant, a crackle of electricity that had been dormant for a year. We didn't talk about our exes. We talked about everything else. I told him about the art class I was taking, about the commission I'd just landed for a small mural. He didn't just listen, he asked questions. He saw the woman I was, not the wife I had been. He walked me to my apartment door. The air in the hallway felt thick with unspoken things. I was attracted to you the moment I saw you in that god-awful cafe, he confessed, his voice husky. It felt like the worst timing in human history. The worst, I agreed, my breath catching. He leaned in his hand, coming up to cup my cheek. His touch was hesitant, gentle, as if he were holding something precious. Is it too soon? I shook my head, closing the small gap between us. The kiss was everything our marriages hadn't been. It was tentative then, hungry, a slow burn that erupted into a wildfire. There was no script, no robotic routine. It was messy and real and breathtaking. He tangled his hands in my hair and I pulled him inside, kicking the door shut behind us. That night I didn't feel broken or replaced. I felt desired. I felt whole. The morning sun streamed through the window. We were tangled in my sheets, limbs intertwined. For the first time in years, I hadn't woken up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "No regrets?" he asked, his voice soft. "Not a single one," I said, propping myself up on my elbow to look at him. "But I don't want to rush this, Sam. I don't want to be a rebound, and I don't want you to be mine." He nodded, tracing a finger along my arm. "I want to build something real, on a solid foundation. Date nights, weekend trips, meeting Maya when the time is right. I want all of it with you, Elara. But I'll wait as long as it takes." He saw the fear in my eyes, the ghost of my past insecurities. He saw the damage Mark had left behind. "For what it's worth," he said, his gaze steady and true, "Mark was an idiot. A blind, colossal idiot. And in that moment, lying in the morning light with a man who saw me, truly saw me, I knew he was right. My self-worth wasn't tied to a failed marriage or a man's infidelity. It was mine. I'd had it all along. I just needed to remember how to pick up a paintbrush again. This wasn't revenge. It was a renaissance. And it was just getting started.